the reason why we are doing the procedural motion, Honorable Speaker,
Yes.
is to discuss this report.
Yes.
So I think I'm really in order, Honorable Speaker, to raise a matter relating to the report, because this is why we are moving the procedural motion.
Go ahead.
So, Honorable Speaker, this report having been tabled last night at 10 in the night, and now it's about 9 in the morning. We got a message from the clerk of the National Assembly at around 00:15 in the morning, Honorable Speaker.
He is on
So,
a point
Honorable
of order.
Speaker, this report,
He is
Honorable
on a
Speaker.
point of order.
Honorable Speaker, you know, Honorable, he knows he's a ranking
Go ahead
member.
and prosecute your agenda.
You know, Honorable Speaker, the question I'm asking and why I need your indulgence, this, Honorable Speaker, this report is a 500-page report with 3,500 pages as annexes. And Mr. Speaker, it was tabled last night at 10. I want you, the reason why I'm seeking for your indulgence, Honorable Speaker, is to allow members time to read this. So if we pass this procedural motion, Honorable Speaker, it means that then we'll debate this report, and I don't think members have had enough time to look at this report. And with the kind of debate, the kind of issues Kenyans have raised on this particular bill, it is important members take their time to look at this report of Honorable Speaker. So the reason why I want you to guide the House is, we do away with this procedural motion, we do today's morning the way it should be, and allow members time to read this. I beg for your indulgence, Honorable Speaker. Thank you.
I will not allow that. I will give direction on what you are raising, Honorable Makali Mulu, after putting this question. I have direction to give you on what I expect us to do. So allow me to put the question that this House resolves to exempt the business appearing on order paper number 12 in today's order paper from the provision of Standing Order 43, being a Wednesday morning, a day allocated for business not sponsored by the majority or minority party, or business sponsored by a committee. As members of that opinion say aye. Aye. As members of the contrary opinion say nay. The ayes have it. Order, Honorable Mbui. Honorable Mbui, probably you didn't follow. I proposed the question. Order, honorable members. Order. If you are in any doubt, the Hansard records everything verbatim. The chair proposed the question, then there was a call to put the question, then the chair rose to put the question, then Honorable Makali Mulu rose and said, before you put the question, can I raise the following issue? And I listened to him, and after he raised his issue, he was not debating the procedural motion. He raised an issue which I've said, after I put the question, I'm going to address it, which I'm going to address now. All right? What you are going to debate at order number 12 is not this report. You are all going to debate the finance bill as published by Parliament. This report is a support document. What you have to look for, and it has been published for some time now, because we have been debating it all over, is the finance bill. When you debate the finance bill, you may make reference to the report, you may restrict yourself to the clauses of the finance bill. 2, this report was tabled last night at about 9:35. Many of us were not in this house, but I directed the clerk to upload it on the website of Parliament, which was done immediately. I also directed that physical copies be available to every member who wishes to have it. I've been advised they are available. 3, the debate we are starting soon hereafter will go on until 1 o'clock. will go on from 2:30 until 9 or 10 if possible. With the reports available, members can at different times be reading their report. As those who have already read the report familiarize themselves with the bill, continue with the debate of the bill. So that those who will speak, the mover of this bill, the chair of the committee, is alone entitled to 45 minutes. By the time he finishes, Robert Mbui would have probably have scanned through this report. If you read John F. Kennedy style, it will take you an hour to run through this report and be able to contribute. But you are not debating the report. You are debating the bill. Understand the procedure of the House. So we will proceed that way. We have not reached order number 12 yet. So let's call out order number 9. Order number 9. If it's about order number 12, I'll give you when we get there. Give him the mic. Can you give the mic to Honorable Nyikal?
Mr. Speaker, what happened when the issue of whether it was proposed or not came? You had called and there was the ayes. Now, some people stood, I know, I'm aware, to actually call for a division. So, Mr. Speaker, mine is to just say those of us who felt there's need for a division should also be given a chance. Those who are saying whether it was proposed, that was a different matter. So, Mr. Speaker, in that confusion, really, Mr. Speaker, justice is superior to the law. So, Mr. Speaker, if some of us needed a division over this matter, why can't we be given that chance?
Honorable Dr. Nyikal, you are a very experienced legislator.
Exactly.
Take your seat. Take your seat. When I think it's Robert Mbui who called for division, I heard him very clearly. From where I sit, I have a bird's eye view of the House, and only 8 members stood. You require 25. There were only 8 members, and I could see. So we have passed that matter. Let's move on to the next. Order number 9.
Order number 9, the Health Amendment number 2 Bill, National Assembly Bill number 42 of 2022, second reading. Mover to reply.
Order. Honorable Didmas Barasa, you reply to your bill.
Thank you very much.
Order number 9.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Before I reply, I want to donate some 2 minutes to Honorable Sloyer, the Member of Parliament for Vihiga, then I will finish.
Honorable Sloyer.
Honorable Sloyer, 2 minutes, and Honorable Babu Wino, 2 minutes.
Excellent. Sloyer, you have 2 minutes.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Speaker. I want to support the motion by the Honorable Didmas Barasa on the health referral system by saying the following. a referral system is supposed to be controlled in this country of ours, because we have seen so many cases whereby our patients are going to different hospitals in the country and getting unnecessary referral to different hospitals which do not even have the capacity to hold or give attention to the issues that the patients have. A referral system should be from a lower capacity institution to a system that is more complex, that is supposed to assist in dealing with the complications that a patient may have. But we find that at times we have poor communication among hospital professionals that at times result into unnecessary costly referrals, which should be controlled at some level, so that we have a referral system that can be of help to our people. We need to have an improved interaction among professionals of healthcare network. So in this country, we find that a patient may go to a hospital like Nairobi Hospital and be referred by a doctor to a lesser institution that is owned by those professionals. So to provide justice to our people and to ensure that they are being taken care of in the best way possible, we need to have a controlled referral system. I have a case in point whereby patients are referred from a health center into a referral hospital that is more or less than the same.
Lawyer, your 2 minutes are up. Baba Wino, give Baba Wino the mic. There's one next to you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I rise to support the bill on the health. Mr. Speaker, in the Bill of Rights, the fundamental human right to life is enshrined in our Constitution. And Mr. Speaker, whoever goes against this right becomes repugnant to the natural laws and justice, and inconsistent and repugnant to the natural laws and justice. Mr. Speaker, our doctors take a Hippocratic oath to preserve life or to protect life, and our nurses take a Nightingale pledge to act professionally. Therefore, Mr. Speaker, if a hospital is referring a patient to another hospital, they should take care of that patient until such a time when that patient arrives into the referred hospital. They should ensure that they preserve life and they protect the patient. In our Kenyan system, Mr. Speaker, you find that a patient is taken to a hospital, left there to die. Procedures are being followed for this patient to be admitted in the hospital that they have been referred to. So therefore, Mr. Speaker, we have a right as a nation to protect and preserve life. Thank you.
Who do you want to inform? Owino has finished his contribution, so you can't inform him. Honorable Didymus.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, this bill seeks to compel the Ministry of Health and the hospital facilities to develop a referral system that will ensure that a person who has been referred to another facility for treatment, that person must be admitted seamlessly. The file of that patient should be sent electronically to the facilities upon which that patient is being referred to, so that upon arrival, that patient should not waste even a single minute, because it's a case that it must be attended to immediately, Honorable Speaker. Honorable Speaker, it also requires that the hospital upon which that is referring this person must continue to attend to this patient until that person reaches to the facility where he or she is being referred to. We have situations in this country, Mr. Speaker, where upon a patient being referred, there is nothing that will happen to that particular patient. He becomes helpless. No one takes care of him. The file is discharged, is closed, and we want to ensure that when a hospital facility refers a patient to another facility, they will continue taking care of this person until he or she arrives at the facility where they have referred that patient to. The second thing, Honorable Speaker, which is very important, is that the person referring the patient to another facility must ensure that the referral process is expeditiously done, more seamlessly, within the shortest time possible, Honorable Speaker, and that upon arrival, that other facility must have superior medical facilities to be able to deal with this kind of emergencies, Honorable Speaker. I want to ask members to support this bill so that we engage further at the Committee of the Whole House and improve this bill further. And I want to thank those who have supported, those who have made their contribution, those who have supported it, those who have opposed this. I have taken notes and I want to appreciate them, everybody, for processing this bill. Mr. Speaker, I beg to move.
Honorable members, I'll now put the question, which is that the Health Amendment Number 2 Bill, National Assembly Bill Number 42 of 2022, be now read a second time. I'm satisfied that there is enough quorum to vote. So as members of that opinion say aye. As members of the contrary opinion say nay. Nay. The nays have it. Next order.
Order number 10, the Cancer Prevention and Control Amendment Bill, number 2 Bill, National Assembly Bill number 39 of 2022, first reading.
Order.
A bill for an act of parliament to amend the Cancer Prevention and Control Act and for connected purposes.
Next order.
Order number 11, the Community Health Workers Bill, National Assembly Bill number 53 of 2022, first reading. A bill for an act of parliament to make provisions for training, registration, and licensing of community health workers, to regulate their practice, to provide for the establishment, powers, and functions of the Community Health Workers Council of Kenya, and for connected purposes. Order number 12, the Finance Bill, National Assembly Bill number 14 of 2023, second reading.
Order, honorable members. Order. Order, honorable members. Take your seats. Take your seats. Order, honorable members. We are now going to order number 12 that has been called out, the Finance Bill. This is a bill like any other. You know, in the budget cycle, there are always two critical bills, the Finance Bill and thereafter the Appropriations Bill. We are starting this bill, and the House Business Committee directed that we will debate this bill the whole of this morning, the whole of this afternoon, if there will be enough members interested in contributing. And depending on how the debate goes, it will then spill over not to tomorrow, but to Tuesday, because tomorrow the Minister of Finance will be here in the afternoon to make the highlights on the budget of 2023-24. In debating this bill, as you know in our own standing orders, the mover of the bill will have 45 minutes. And in the event that he's not done in the 45 minutes, the chair may indulge him to finish what he wants to present. Of course, at the end of the debate, his reply time is 15 minutes. Each member who will contribute will be entitled to 10 minutes unless the House, in its own considered view, wishes to reduce that period so that more members can contribute. That I leave it to the House. As and when any member raises such an issue, the chair will consider either on its own or put a question to it. The leader of majority and the leader of minority, you will be entitled to 15 minutes each on this debate. And I want to encourage us that this is a bill that has generated quite a bit of extra parliamentary debate. Focus on the bill, debate the bill, and the time for mastering any amendments to the bill, as you all know, comes at the committee of the whole, which will probably come tomorrow this afternoon or on Tuesday, depending on how the interest in the debate goes. Everybody will be given an opportunity to debate. As usual, my screen is full. I don't know if it was full for the items we have already finished or for the coming bill, but we'll use both the screen and the discretion of the chair to pick members to speak. I encourage decorum. Your right to speak must be equal to your duty to listen. So those who speak must also be ready to listen to those who have listened to them. And that is the way debate should be in this House. So the chairman of the committee, you can now take the floor and move the bill.
Point of order, Mr.
Yes, Honorable Farah.
Mr. Speaker, thank you very much for that delivery. I want to seek the indulgence of the chair. Because of the widespread interest in this particular bill, exempting the leadership of the House, the majority leader and the minority leader here, I suggest that the rest of us be limited to 5 minutes. If you can't deliver a very powerful argument in 5 minutes, you can't even deliver it in 10 minutes. I've been in this House for 30 years, and I know it.
Bowen.
Yes. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I want to second the deputy or the honorable member who've just spoken that we need to reduce because of we have many members, Honorable Speaker, and you know the finance bill, Honorable Speaker, it's very important to members of this House and also the nation as whole. It's important that we reduce for members to 5 minutes, and apart from the leader of majority and the leader of minority, they can have the 15 minutes, but the rest of us, we can have 5 minutes each. I support.
Yes, Donya.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. You actually need even a minute to know if this thing is right or wrong. I don't see the sense of having the 10 minutes while each of us need to debate on this bill, we share on our grievances, how we feel about it. When you look at a lady, you can say she took 1 minute to prepare her makeup, not a whole 10 minutes to describe something. As I stand here, you can know that that lady dressed well or bad. That is 1 second. 10 minutes, what will you be describing in 10 minutes? 5 minutes are enough. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Honorable members, Can the majority and minority leader approach the chair? Majority and minority leader. Order, Honorable Dr. Nyikal, please. Honorable Dr. Nyikal, you are one of the most seasoned members. Order, Honorable Dr. Nyikal. Dr. Nyikal, you know, apart from your long professional career in medicine, which controls human behavior sometimes, the chair has tremendous respect for you. And you are the last member I would expect age, profession, and experience to do what you are doing. Order, Honorable Dr. Nyikal. Honorable members, having had 3 members and consulted with your leadership, it's generally a consensus that we can do 5 minutes per member. Any member who will have material to prosecute and the chair is convinced that you have much more to say, the discretion will be exercised. Now I call on the mover to start.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I rise before you today with a sense of gratitude and appreciation for the opportunity to speak to this National Assembly when you're all looking forward to this great conversation on the Finance Bill of 2023-2024, a responsibility that is mandated. Yes?
You start by saying, Mr. Speaker, sir, I beg to move that the Finance Bill be now read a second time.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Then you move the way you are moving.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I rise to move that this Finance Bill be read for the second time. Honorable Speaker, I hold a lot of gratitude for the responsibility that bestowed on the Committee of Finance and National Planning as per the Standing Order number 245. The Committee of Finance and National Planning carried out the most extensive public participation in the history of Parliament. Our members of the committee sat between 10 and 12 hours every day listening to the members of the public, listening to various views of Kenyans. Our members of Secretariat sat hours reviewing the over 1,500 memoranda that were sent to us by email, taking care to respond individually to each of those emails with comments and noting those comments in our report, a report that we have annexed, that we tabled yesterday, that provide annexures of around 3,000 pages. Honorable Speaker, this comes at a time when we also, yesterday evening, we did the estimates and the appropriations, Honorable Speaker. It's very interesting to note that the Committee on Budget and Appropriations Committee, when they are doing their budget participation on the budget, the views of the Kenyans and the Kenyans who appeared before them all came with smiling faces, because they were saying, we want that road completed, we want that dam done, we want connection of water in our homes, we want extension of electricity connection in our homes. But, Honorable Speaker, the experience may not have been the same when we were asking the members of the public on the views of how that budget that they really wanted implemented, we would raise the funds to fund that particular budget, Honorable Speaker. Honorable Speaker, before I go to materials on the facts of the bill, it comes at a time when this bill faced a lot of falsehoods and political, I would call it political assassination, Honorable Speaker. I've listened to the members of the public, I've listened to members of this Parliament, Honorable Speaker, debating on some matters that will be contained on the bill. And one of them, Mr. Speaker, that I really found interesting and really unfortunate is the miscommunication, for example, on compensation of insurance services. I had members of the public say that if, for example, I lose my leg and I get compensated, then I'm going to pay 16% of that compensation. I had members of the public and even members of this National Assembly say that if an insurable loss occurs and, for example, I lose my car through insurance and I get insurance compensation, then I'm going to pay VAT on that insurance compensation. But, Honorable Speaker, I would like to refer you to page 240 of the bill, clause 30, section 9, and I read verbatim, that where a bona fide owner of a taxable supply who has deducted input tax under subsection 1 is compensated for the loss, that compensation that includes VAT shall be declared and the VAT thereupon remitted to the Commissioner. Or B, if the compensation does not include VAT, the compensation shall be declared and subjected to VAT and the tax remitted to the Commissioner. Keywords here, Honorable Speaker, is taxable supplies. And I want to ask members of this House and members of the public, is insurance compensation for your leg a taxable supply? Is a compensation of your car when you get involved in an accident a taxable supply? Is when the goods of your home get burned because of a fire, is that a taxable supply? And perhaps to get a little technical here, Honorable Speaker, what this clause purports to mean, where businesses actually hold goods that are vatable, then they would have paid input tax on those particular items. So if they get compensated plus the VAT that they ask for a refund, and then they go ahead and charge output VAT on those particular services, on those particular goods, Mr. Speaker, then it would have been deemed they received that compensation for VAT twice. So this double VAT refund is what this clause, Honorable Speaker, was trying to cure, and that is what is contained on the bill, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I would like to draw your attention to our tax system in Kenya. Our tax revenue as a share of our GDP has remained consistently at approximately 15%. This stagnation is a cause of concern to the Committee of Finance and National Planning, and this is some of the issues that this particular bill, Honorable Speaker, wanted to address. In comparison, Honorable Speaker, with several African countries, Botswana's tax revenue per GDP is at 24%. Mauritius is at 18%. Zambia's is 17%. But, Honorable Speakers, ours has remained consistent at 13% as of 2021. These countries, Honorable Speaker, have managed to achieve higher tax revenue collection rates. The disparity highlights, Honorable Speaker, is a need for us to reassess our tax policy and explore more effective ways of enhancing revenue mobilization. Honorable Speaker, I would like to talk about our economy for the past decade. We have witnessed an evolution in our economy with the emergences of employment opportunities in the digital market space. Additionally, a majority of jobs have been created during this period and have been in the informal sector, employing approximately 80% or 18 million shillings of our Kenyans in 2021. Mr. Speaker, the Finance Bill of 2023 had several tax proposals that will enable the country to increase its tax base, essentially increasing its revenues. The committee carried out the public participation and deliberated on the matters which informed the following decisions. For instance, Clause 2, which deals with the definition of terms, Honorable Speaker, had the definition of winnings when it came to the betting sector, Mr. Speaker. Something that we addressed, and the bill now try to tighten up on those particular winnings so that it doesn't lead to loss of revenues to the government of Kenya, Honorable Speaker, and also it doesn't crowd out potential businesses to live and go and set base outside this country, Mr. Speaker. Clause 5 of the bill suggests imposition of taxes on club entrances and subscription fees for employees. However, if it's implemented, this would result a double taxation, as both the employee and the employer would be taxed on these fees. In response to this concern, the committee made the changes to the clause, allowing that the taxation to be applied only for the employer's income instead. Clause 10, Honorable Speaker, of the proposed registration introduced a new tax called the digital asset tax, specifically targeting the taxation of profits generated from digital assets, such as cryptocurrencies and non-fungible assets, the one we call NFTs. Many stakeholders expressed their desire to have this proposal removed, as they believed it will discourage traders. However, The committee noted that the reason for setting up the tax rate of 3% of the gross turnover is to facilitate compliance and for trading and also for simplifying the process. It will note, Honorable Speaker, that Kenya becomes now, if this bill passes as amended, Honorable Speaker, becomes one of the first countries in the region to recognize cryptocurrencies and digital assets and bitcoins as a way of a form of payment, as a form of trade, and therefore generating revenue from these particular digital assets, Honorable Speaker. The committee observed that Clause 12 that restricts expenses without ITIMs invoices as complemented by Clause 57. This would exempt individuals from registering in the electronic system management system. The exemption ensures that small traders, the one we popularly known as mama mbogas, and those that are in the formal sector are not negatively impacted by this particular proposal. Additionally, therefore, the commissioner we have proposed will ensure administrative guidelines to address any concerns regarding the implementation of this system. But we have uploaded that there is a need to have every trader and every business person in the country operate within the ITIMS system, Honorable Speaker, and this we realize would enhance both revenue collection and reduce the cost of tax administration. Honorable Speaker, stakeholders expressed their concerns on Clause 20, which would require that withholding taxes be remitted to the Kenya Revenue Authority within 24 hours. They believed that this timeline was too short and would result in additional administrative expenses, Honorable Speaker. But the proposal here, Honorable Speaker, we have had many institutions, many companies that withhold, whether it's excise duty or VAT, that means they are agents for the collection of these particular taxes, had up to 50 days before they remitted these particular payments to the Kenya Revenue Authority. So, Honorable Speaker, we noticed that by them getting 50 days of these taxes, it means these businesses were being funded through their working capital by taxpayers' money, Honorable Speaker. But again, from having between 20 and 50 days to remit these monies to KRA to under 24 hours, we found that 24 hours was a little too ambitious, and the committee amended that and said we would allow that these businesses can remit these particular taxes within 5 working days. The key word here, working, Honorable Speaker, also takes care of the complexities of weekends and and official holidays, Honorable Speaker. Clause 24 was one other very contested by many stakeholders. They were concerned about the proposal to increase pay rate for individuals earning more than 500,000 shillings. And Honorable Speaker, having really considered this, we found also that our tax bands have not been amended for years. And part of our recommendation, even if you're not able to make this particular amendment in this particular bill, Honorable Speaker, there is need to revise our tax bands for pay because they have not been revised for very many years. But Honorable Speaker, we suggested instead of having the 35% only accrue from 500,000 shillings to above, we add an additional tax band of 500,000 shillings to 800,000 shillings to be charged at a pay rate of 32.5%, and those earning more than 800,000 to be taxed at a rate of 35%, Honorable Speaker. Clause 24 introduced digital content monetization at a withholding tax of 15%. However, we notice that this is, if you compare the withholding tax on other professions, whether it's legal fees, accounting fees, management fees, and all the other professional fees, withholding tax on all these particular fees is at 3%, Honorable Speaker. And that is why we found that charging digital content creators at 500% more was unfair and punitive to this very, very growing sector, and we propose that this withholding tax be reduced to 3% withholding tax, Honorable Speaker. And it's good also, Honorable Speaker, to appreciate the expansion of this particular sector. We have got very, very many Kenyans, especially young Kenyans, who are exerting very, very well on this space. But some people are asking us, then why are we taxing us? I'd like to remind our digital content creators, Honorable Speaker, the teachers that got employed recently that earn an income of 30,000 shillings per month, Honorable Speaker, they pay their rightful share of tax. The nurses that help our mothers deliver in our hospitals, or the nurses that treat our old relatives and the old people in home-based care, pay their rightful share of tax. The doctors that work day and night to save lives of this particular country, the emergency attendants that work in our ambulances pay their rightful share of taxes, Honorable Speaker. So we are really asking, we are not asking you to pay 15% or digital content creators, that is too much, but we are going to politely ask you to pay 3% withholding tax so that we can generate revenue to connect other people to the national grid of electricity in our villages so that they can also get a chance to also participate in this sector that you are in, Honorable Speaker. And I like the introduction of this has also opened a national dialogue about digital content creators. And they came and told us, now, next time we want you to incentivize us by reducing the prices of our cameras, of the video cameras that we use to generate this content, Mr. Speaker. And views that we have taken seriously as a committee, we will endeavor now to carry them on in our next report, Mr. Speaker. Clause 28 of the proposed increase of VAT on petroleum and liquefied petroleum gas from 8% to 16%, Honorable Speaker, was a very contended issue, Honorable Speaker. But what has the committee done? Honorable Speaker, when we put the VAT on fuel at 8% and every vegetable product at 16%, so what that meant, Honorable Speaker, that these particular businesses in this particular sector were always in a VAT credit refund position, because their input tax, Honorable Speaker, they're able to pay their VAT on input at 16%. But when they sell this fuel at 8%, Honorable Speaker, it means there's an 8% difference, which means that these particular businesses have always been on a credit side when they're asking for tax refund, Mr. Speaker. And what that essentially means is that taxpayers' money have been used to finance these businesses that carry out the business of this of fuel, Mr. Speaker, because of that disparity between their input tax that they pay at 16%, but their output tax they claim at 8%, Honorable Speaker, which therefore creates that particular position. Honorable Speaker, we have agreed that we are going to carry on this VAT on fuel at 16%, but on the other hand, we looked at the agreement that Kenya had, the discussions that we've had about climate change, about climate financing, about going green by 2030, Honorable Speaker. And we have this, and we recommend to this House that we adopt other measures that are going to ensure our Kenyans against this increased cost of VAT, and making sure that in moving forward, that the cost of green energy is going to be way cheaper, and therefore reducing the need for use of these fossil fuels, Honorable Speaker. And that's why, for example, we have zero-rated both LPG gas and LPG cylinders, Honorable Speaker. And this is not just exempting them, but by zero-rating them, we are making these particular manufacturers and traders on this particular aspect, business, Mr. Speaker, to be allowed to claim their input tax at 16%, which therefore means that if these proposals are carried on by these businesses and this advantage being transferred to the consumers, we are going to see the price of our LPG gas and LPG cylinders go down by 16%. In addition to that, the other cost elements that comprise of fuel, the railway development levy and ID and import declaration fees, Honorable Speaker, we have reduced that to around, that is at like 3%. So when you check the increase from 8% to 16%, it means the actual increase on VAT on fuel is only 8 percentage points. And if you now deduct the reduction on railway development levy and IDF, that means that the marginal increase on VAT on fuel would be around 4 percentage, would be around 4.5 percentage points, Honorable Speaker. On this also, we are looking forward to having most of the imports. The data from our Kenya Revenue Authority, from the Customs Department, has shown that most of the motor vehicles that are importing this country are hybrid cars, because Kenyans are now going to motor vehicles that don't rely wholly on fuel, but are both, and that are semi-electric and semi-use fuel, Honorable Speaker. And as such, we have incentivized manufacturers of electric motor vehicles, electric motorcycles, electric border cycles, so that in the long run we grow our manufacturing of electric buses, electric vehicles, and electric motorcycles. And not just that, zero-rated also their charging system and their charging units. And we look forward, just like countries like the United States of America or the UK, where most of the means of transport, whether it is buses or motorcycles, Honorable Speaker, are going to be electric, and therefore reducing the need for use of fuel, Honorable Speaker. Key to note, Honorable Speaker, one of the greatest challenges you're facing as a country has also been the depreciation of the Kenya shillings against the US dollars, Honorable Speaker. And the oil component, the amount of money we are spending per month, per annum, importing this fuel is a point of concern. So until that time, when we explore our own oil and have our own oil, Honorable Speaker, we have to think about alternative sources of energy that are green, that are cheaper, and that are sustainable, Honorable Speaker. We also was interesting to find innovations that have been done by some companies. And I would like to give an example of a institution called Coco that makes biofuel. They have come up with an innovation of stoves and canisters that reduce the cost of safe fuel for use for cooking at home to Kenya shillings, 10 shillings per meal. That it can cost you at least around 10 shillings to prepare a meal at home. And how much does that cooker and that canister cost? Only 1,500, Mr. Speaker. And these particular institutions, we have seen them expand across the country. And if we continue to incentivize use of clean energy for cooking, we are going to get away from these fossil fuels and reduce the pressure on our imports, Honorable Speaker, therefore leading to a stabilization of our shilling and make the movement of particular sectors and our consumables much more cheaper, Honorable Speaker. Honorable Speaker, our committee also introduced an amendment to the first schedule of the VAT Act, incorporating taxable food supplies that are made for the school feeding program, acknowledged by the Cabinet Secretary of Education, Honorable Speaker. During a time when you're talking about hunger, when you're talking about food security, Honorable Speaker, and our school children, and our school-going children, we have seen efforts, even by county governments. We have seen efforts by, I think, our best serving example is the constituency headed by the Honorable KJ, that have been able to establish a very effective school feeding program at, I think, only 20 shillings per meal, Honorable Speaker. So what we have done is an introduction to introduce to the first schedule of the VAT Act taxable, so food supplies that are made to school feeding programs to be zero-rated. This means that those school feeding programs that are counties, that are different institutions are trying to start in our schools then are going to be incentivized and are going to grow, Honorable Speaker. And I think another example is what Mombasa Cement is doing in Mombasa by having a school feeding program that almost feeds all school-going children in that particular county, Honorable Speaker. The committee observed that there was an attempt, or there's a proposal in the bill to exempt from VAT transfer of businesses as a going concern. This, Honorable Speaker, would have led to a loss of 100 billion shillings in terms of the proposed taxes, Honorable Speaker. And this is one of the clauses that we have recommended for deletion. So that if when I transfer my money from my bank account, from one bank account to another bank account, I pay VAT and I pay excess duty. When I transfer money from my M-Pesa account to someone else's M-Pesa account, even when I'm transferring money from one of my M-Pesa lines to my other M-Pesa line, I get to pay a tax. Why would we exempt transfer of businesses as a going concern from taxation? From the calculations given to us by the Budget Parliamentary Office, this was going to lead to a potential loss of 100 billion shillings, money that we have now got back in the bill, and therefore the deletion of this particular clause would mean that we will be able to raise an additional 100 billion shillings, Honorable Speaker. Clause 36 was another contended issue, Mr. Speaker. This clause required that if you went to court and you had a tax dispute, and you went to tribunal, and you lost the case, if you wanted to appeal your case, you would be required to deposit 20% of the disputed amount with Kenya Revenue Authority. We found that this was a violation of the rights of taxpayers to access justice. It was unfair to require somebody who seeks legal redress because they feel aggrieved to be required to pay a deposit of 20% for it. And Honorable Speaker, we urge this House to carry on the proposal for deletion of this particular clause, Honorable Speaker. Clause 43B, 4, 5, 6, and 7. Honorable Speaker, again, I had extensively talked about that particular matter. Let me get to clause 59. The deletion of clause 59 from the bill, Honorable Speaker, was about the Tax Procedures Act and general provision relating to objections and appeals. And this, Honorable Speaker, was opposing restrictions to access to justice, and a proposal that, Honorable Speaker, we say they be deleted. Clause 61, Honorable Speaker, regards to Section 84 of the Tax Procedures Act. The committee proposes that 61 be deleted due to its punitive nature of concerning the tax shortfall penalty. Currently, Clause 61 imposes penalties for tax shortfalls without taking into consideration of innocent and inadvertent errors made by taxpayers. Honorable Speaker, this clause said that if you underdeclared your taxes, or the Kenya Revenue Authority felt that you had underdeclared your taxes, that they would penalize you for it. And we felt it may not have been deliberate. It could be an accounting error that was done when you're filing your returns, and therefore we have deleted that requirement for that particular penalty to be imposed on taxpayers. Clause 62 on penalties for failing to comply with the Electronic Systems Act. This amendment is to insert a new section 86 that aims to modify the penalty provisions related to non-compliance with the electronic tax system, making the penalty more reasonable and conducive. Honorable Speaker, this particular proposal was recommending that if you were not on e-Teams, or if you were found that you needed to issue an iTax receipt but did not issue one, then you would be fined 10 times more. You'd be required to pay a fine of 10 times the amount that was tax due. Honorable Speaker, in as much that we want to enforce compliance with this particular tax system, we felt a fine of 10 times more was too punitive, and Honorable Speaker, we propose that the penalty only be 2 times of the tax due, Honorable Speaker. Honorable Speaker, we are proposing an amendment to the bill to include a new clause 67, and this, Honorable Speaker, it wants to address the powers granted to the Commissioner regarding the adjustment of specific rates of export levy. Currently, Section 5.4 allows the adjustment of the specific rate of export levy to account for inflation. However, it is proposed that this provision be removed as it mirrors Section 10 of the Excess Duty Act. Clause 6 of the bill already seeks to eliminate the Commissioner's power to adjust specific rates of excess duty based on inflation. The rationale behind this proposed amendments is to ensure consistency in the treatment of specific rates for both export levy and excess duty, Honorable Speaker. Clause 76 of the bill on the deductions of the National Housing Fund, Honorable Speaker. Another very contentious issue. We listened to the view of Kenyans, and Kenyans told us it is a good thing to make houses affordable to the public. It's a good thing that somebody who rents an apartment in Kenor or in Section 58 or in either part of the country and pays rent have an alternative of paying the equivalent of the rent but get to own that house at the end of a particular period, Honorable Speaker. Mortgages, access to mortgages still remain a privilege of the high-end people in this particular market, Honorable Speaker. We agreed, and every stakeholder that we met told us, yes, it's going to lead to job creation. The doors that are going to be made, the windows that are going to be made, the suppliers for those particular goods, the people that are going to provide the rest of the service, that is the spiral effect of it. The people are going to sell food into those particular units, Honorable Speaker. We felt, they said there is a need for this particular housing fund, Honorable Speaker. But they were worried about the how. And they were telling us, for you to start us off with 3% of our basic pay, it is too punitive. They told us, and one of them, I remember, looking at me on the face and telling me, Honorable Chair, if we cap this particular housing fund to 2,500 shillings a month, and you tell me that I'm paying 3%, you're not paying 3% of your basic pay. You're actually paying around 0.0045 of your basic pay. And they said, this is discriminative. we feel that you people that are earning a lot more want to pay much less than us. Because I get to pay my rightful share of 3% if I'm earning around 80,000 shillings a month, but you who is earning 500,000 shillings, because you have capped that contribution to 2,500, you pay 0.0045%. Honorable Speaker, we listened to the view of these Kenyans, and we propose a reduction in the housing fund contribution from 3% employer and 3% employee to 1.5% employee contribution and 1.5% employer contribution, Honorable Speaker. And it's very important to note that the capping that was capping the contribution to 2,500 has been removed, because this would have been discriminative against those people that are earning less, because those people earning less would have paid their rightful share of the 1.5%, but you and I that have a higher pay slip then would get to pay much less or a higher percentage, Honorable Speaker. We have also established that these funds will go into the consolidated fund, Honorable Speaker, as per the PFM Act. Mr. Speaker, the shift towards the informal sector also poses challenges to our tax revenue. As the economy diversifies, the jobs opportunities arise in all sectors, it has become crucial to expand our tax base. Honorable Speaker, Kenyans told us that the few of us are paying taxes, but there are so many others that should pay the rightful pay of tax that are not paying. And key in point was the small businesses. And Honorable Speaker, on the proposal to have the turnover tax have a threshold of 500,000 shillings would mean that those people selling around 1,000 with the sales of around 1,600 shillings a day would be required to pay a turnover tax of 3%. Honorable Speaker, we saw this band too little, and we have therefore proposed to increase this band to at least 1 million shillings sales per annum to 25 million shillings per annum as those Kenyans that would pay the turnover tax, Honorable Speaker. And you're also telling them, people are asking, why are you taxing me on gross instead of taxing me on profit? And Honorable Speaker, we have told them that at the end of the year, you do not have to pay turnover tax. If you want, you can pay the corporation tax at 30%, but then you'll have to calculate your revenues and deduct your tax allowable expenses. And many Kenyans were like, I don't want to go through that process. Tell me how much I need to pay because I want to pay my rightful share of tax. I'll pay that, and we absolutely move forward, Honorable Speaker. With those many remarks, Honorable Speaker, I really would wish to thank the members of the committee. It was very tedious work. It was a lot of work. Most of us still have a back problem even now. Our members of Secretariat, they have been doing almost 24 hours of work to make sure that we put this particular report in order, Honorable Speaker. And because I want to give as many honorable members as possible to contribute to this particular matter, I only have one last statement to make, Honorable Speaker. The difference between tax exempt and zero rated. This, I find it quite baffling that we use tax exemption and zero rate interchangeably. They are as different as heaven and earth. Because when services or products are exempted from tax, it means that those businesses cannot claim their input tax. And that makes the price of those particular products at least 16% more expensive. And that is why, although the bill proposes to exempt manufacturing of fertilizer, manufacturing of pharmaceuticals, manufacturing of human vaccines, manufacturing of pesticides, agriculture equipment, transportation of sugarcane from factories, from farms to factories, to be tax exempted. This committee, Honorable Speaker, has recommended in our report that these particular products and services be moved from tax exemption to zero rate, so that that transfer of that manufacturing of fertilizer, manufacturing of pharmaceuticals, manufacturing of medicine, manufacturing of human vaccines, be allowed to be, that benefit be allowed to be transferred to the consumer by making those particular products 16% cheaper, Honorable Speaker. But we are hoping, and this I want to really urge the Kenya Revenue Authority to make sure that they enforce that once we transfer these particular privileges and this zero rating of these products and services, that benefit be transferred to the consumer. We want to see the price of LPG gas and LPG cylinders go down by 16% if this House approves this particular recommendation, Honorable Speaker. We want to see the cost of locally manufactured fertilizer go down by 16% if this particular proposal is accepted by this Honorable Speaker. We want to see the price of locally manufactured medicine and human vaccines and pharmaceuticals and agricultural pesticides go down by 16%, Honorable Speaker, if these particular proposals are accepted by this House, Honorable Speaker. We have a very ambitious, this bill has an ambitious plan of exporting mobile phones across Africa, Honorable Speaker. We have seen the demand of smartphones and mobile phones in this country, and we have a big potential to manufacture them. The manufacturers of mobile phones came and told us that, Honorable Committee members, if you zero rate these products that are used as raw materials for assembly of mobile phones, we would be able to manufacture mobile phones in Kenya, smartphones in Kenya at a cost of at least 8,000 shillings and be able to export this to other African countries, Mr. Speaker. We found this very revolutionary, and we urge this House to support this particular amendment, Honorable Speaker. We have had a huge influx in a digital space in terms of digital lenders, Honorable Speaker. But we found that the excise duty and the VAT on the transaction fees on digital platforms for mobile money and for digital lenders was discriminatory against that of the banks, because banks were getting preferential treatment by getting preferential rates. But, Honorable Speaker, our report aims at harmonizing the rates that are being charged by digital lenders and microfinance institutions to that of the banks, Honorable Speaker, so that we create a level playing field. Honorable Speaker, some of us, when we left school, the first thing we wanted to do was open a bank account. The people that are leaving school, the first thing they want to do is not open a bank account, is to have a digital wallet. And we're saying we need to incentivize this space. This is the next frontier in financial inclusion, and we are asking this Honorable House to agree with us and pass our report, pass the amended finance bill as proposed by the Committee of Finance and National Planning. And with those very many remarks, I want to donate the rest of my minutes so that this House can extensively debate this particular matter, and hopefully our good idea can give birth to a great idea, and that great idea can give birth to the greatest ideas. And with that, Honorable Speaker, I support, and I ask the Vice Chair of our committee, the Honorable Ambassador Benjamin Langat, to second.
Thank you, Honorable Kimani. Who is seconding you? Danger.
Yes, sir. Yes, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I want to thank you for the opportunity to second this bill, and I rise to second this finance bill of 2023, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, you said yesterday that this bill has been transacted in funerals, churches, other social places, Mr. Speaker, and you advise us that we must now come to the House and transact this bill. Mr. Speaker, we have just come from a campaign less than a year ago. Some of the issues that were transacted or canvassed, Mr. Speaker, were mainly three issues, Mr. Speaker. One of them was cost of living. Number two, Mr. Speaker, our level of public debts. Number four, Mr. Speaker, is empowerment of the youth. Mr. Speaker, it is in the public domain that our public debt is the highest ever, Mr. Speaker. And because of itinerance of commission or omission, Mr. Speaker, we found ourselves there. Mr. Speaker, if I was to liken Kenya to a public company, Mr. Speaker, I would say Kenya is a very high-geared company, Mr. Speaker. We have borrowed more than what we should have done, Mr. Speaker. And those of us who are accountants, who have managed public entities, Mr. Speaker, you know when a company is high-geared, Mr. Speaker, you have two options. One is to close the company, Mr. Speaker. Number two, Mr. Speaker, is to bring in more capital, Mr. Speaker, by the shareholders. Mr. Speaker, this republic, the shareholders are Kenyans. Mr. Speaker, this house is the board of management, Mr. Speaker. The president is the CEO, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, we must make a decision whether we want to close the company or we bring in more capital injection, Mr. Speaker. If you ask the shareholders of the company will say, no, we are not closing the company, Mr. Speaker. We need to do something to bring in more capital, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, if I liken this country to an individual, Mr. Speaker, I would say the person is sick. When you are sick, Mr. Speaker, you must seek for medical advice, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, sometimes the doctor prescribes medicine. And Mr. Speaker, medicine are not always very sweet. They are not palatable, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, sometimes the doctor might even prefer that surgery be done, Mr. Speaker. And surgery is not very, very nice, Mr. Speaker. But, Mr. Speaker, we must do it because that is the only thing that remains to be done. Why am I saying that, Mr. Speaker? This country is faced by very serious problems of public debt, very serious problems of cost of living, very serious problems of the need to create employment, Mr. Speaker. And, Mr. Speaker, if we continue doing things the same way we used to do, Mr. Speaker, it can only be the results are the same. We'll continue borrowing, Mr. Speaker. We'll continue not having employment for our youth, Mr. Speaker. So, Mr. Speaker, I'm only saying this bill is good because it proposes radical changes, Mr. Speaker, to help us to resolve the problems that will come, that we are in now, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the question is the process nice? Mr. Speaker, it may not be nice. But, Mr. Speaker, we need to take those decisions so that tomorrow is better than today, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I want to thank the members of the committee because we sat and we listened to members of the public, Mr. Speaker, through a public participation process. Mr. Speaker, I'm a former chairman of this committee in the 11th Parliament, Mr. Speaker, and I can confirm there has never been an interest in finance bill more than what I saw in this one, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, we received almost 200 representations from members of the public, organizations, professional organizations, Mr. Speaker. And, Mr. Speaker, I want to inform the House that we listen to them, Mr. Speaker. And the question is, does the bill have issues? Yes, there are small issues. But, Mr. Speaker, I'm happy to report to the House that more than 60% of the concerns of Kenyans, Mr. Speaker, we have carried it in our report, Mr. Speaker. And so, members, when you are reading the bill as it is now, you read it together with the report which was tabled yesterday, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I want to say that all the matters that were of contention, we were able to give it a hearing, and a recommendation will be put to this House, Mr. Speaker, to make sure that we alleviate the fears of the public sector, Mr. Speaker. Some of the issues include the excise duty on both manufactured goods in the country and imported goods, Mr. Speaker. And the stance of the committee, Mr. Speaker, throughout was that we must support local manufacture. We must give competitive advantage, Mr. Speaker, to our manufacturing sectors, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, if we were to industrialize, if we were to give jobs to our youths, we must see how to incentivize the manufacturing sector, Mr. Speaker. And that is why some of our proposals are actually deleting the proposals to tax excise on locally manufactured raw materials or goods, Mr. Speaker, so that our companies, we can encourage local manufacture, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, one of the other proposals in this bill, Mr. Speaker, is the export levy, Mr. Speaker. Our exports are always less than our imports, Mr. Speaker, because we don't export much. And that's why that levy is there in the bill to make sure, Mr. Speaker, that we build our exports. When I come from a tea growing region, which is the major export product in Kenya, Mr. Speaker. When we talk with them, Mr. Speaker, they tell you we only export to maybe 4 countries, 3 countries in Africa, 4 countries in European countries, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, that's a very dangerous situation. We need to build our export markets for our coffee, for our tea, Mr. Speaker, for our avocados, Mr. Speaker, and the services, Mr. Speaker. So this bill, although we seek to get the money, we are also saying we want not to tax the local manufacturers, Mr. Speaker. So, Mr. Speaker, I'm happy that as a committee, we listen to the members of the public, and I want to encourage the House. It will be a serious issue, Mr. Speaker, to pretend that we want the status quo to remain, yet at the same time we want changes. I know our friends from the other side, because I've heard them talk, Mr. Speaker. It will be wrong for us to say we remain status quo, yet you want changes, Mr. Speaker. We must do something to bring changes, Mr. Speaker, and we must be willing, Mr. Speaker, to take the necessary painful decisions now, so that, as I say earlier, tomorrow is better than today, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, so that I give time to other members, I want to say I support the bill, including the amendments. I second the bill, including the amendments that will be brought at the right stage, Mr. Speaker. And I want to encourage all the members to rise to the occasion, Mr. Speaker. We become bold. We reduce our public debt, Mr. Speaker. We increase our revenues, Mr. Speaker, so that we become a very self-reliant country, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, if we continue the same, we can only increase the public debt. If we continue the same, Mr. Speaker, we'll continue building up bending bills, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, yesterday we passed the estimates, and all the members were happy. Of course, our members from the other side were not there. But, Mr. Speaker, I heard the chair of budget say we have given 613 billion to education. I heard him also say we have given double the allocation to health, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, that promise will remain a promise if we do not pass a finance bill that will help us to raise the necessary revenues that our country needs. Mr. Speaker, I'm looking in future, Mr. Speaker, that we will be able to raise enough revenues. We borrow zero, Mr. Speaker. I'm looking for a day, Mr. Speaker, we are able to lend to other countries, Mr. Speaker, because we have raised more than enough revenue, Mr. Speaker.
Order, honorable members, before I propose the question, allow me to recognize the following schools in the speakers and public gallery. St. Francis Secondary School, Mwea, Kirinyaga. Al-Amin Stare, Nairobi. Kinderville School, Mavoko, Machakos. St. Hannah's School, Westlands, Nairobi. On your behalf and on my own behalf, I welcome the students and their teachers in the House of Parliament. Order, honorable members. Members who are on their feet, take your seats. Honorable members, I now propose the question, which is that the Finance Bill, National Assembly Bill number 14 of 2023 be now read a second time. As usual, the screen is full. Robert Mbui.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for this opportunity. Mr. Speaker.
Compose your thoughts and deliver your messages in 5 minutes.
One more because you've taken part of it. Mr. Speaker, first and foremost, I want to say that this is the most contentious finance bill since I was elected in this House in 2013. In fact, Mr. Speaker, this is so contentious that I look at it like a drum of poison. And Mr. Speaker, when I listen to the mover and the seconder, they've mentioned some amendments. They're proposing a few things that are in the bill that are okay. It's like saying that they have put a teaspoon of sugar in a drum of poison. Mr. Speaker, for me, I think this bill is something that we must reject in its totality. Mr. Speaker, the economic situation in this country is very dire. Kenyans are struggling. Kenyans are suffering. Mr. Speaker, very few Kenyans can actually put 3 or 4 square meals in a day on the table. Mr. Speaker, Kenyans are asking themselves, do we put food on the table for our children, or do we pay fees? Do we buy clothes? Everything is difficult. Life is difficult. Mr. Speaker, that is one of the reasons why you saw our team of Azimio going to the streets, because we are feeling that somebody needs to start caring for the hustlers. Mr. Speaker, 1,000 shillings a few months ago could buy, maybe even fill a paper bag. Mr. Speaker, today, with 1,000 shillings, you cannot even buy 2 kilos of sugar, 2 kilos of unga, 2 kilos of cooking flour. I mean, it's already finished, Mr. Speaker. So I'm telling you, it is a very bad situation. Now, this bill, when we heard that there was going to be some proposed amendments, we thought they would deal with those things that are affecting the cost of living. 16% VAT on petroleum products has been retained. Mr. Speaker, what does that mean? That the cost of everything transported, goods and services, will go up. The cost of electricity will go up. Mr. Speaker, there's also advance tax that has been proposed on personal public service vehicles and, of course, on transporters. Again, Mr. Speaker, the minute you increase taxation, what it does, Mr. Speaker, is that will be passed on to the end user. And, Mr. Speaker, the end user is that person that we call the hustler. Mr. Speaker, who will speak for the hustlers? Mr. Speaker, our turnover tax, which is a tax on doing business where there is no profit, has gone up from 1% to 3%. Mr. Speaker, how do you tax people for having the dream of opening up a business? And we are being told that those at the bottom of the bracket are going to be raised, they are going to be assisted. Mr. Speaker, this was a hoax. Now Kenyans can see for themselves that there was never any good intention from this Kenya Kwanza regime. Mr. Speaker, this House must stand up to be counted. And this House must listen to the voice of Kenyans. Over 93% of Kenyans have said we reject the finance bill. 93% of Kenyans, those that voted for us. Mr. Speaker, I am shocked that members of the House can stand up and say, despite the fact that our voters are unhappy with the bill, we shall continue and vote in its support. Mr. Speaker,
Yes, there's a point of order from the majority leader.
There shouldn't be point of order.
It is part of your debate.
Honorable Speaker, I rise on standing order number 91. And I hear Robert Mbui saying there should be no points of order. But I think that is a prerogative of the Speaker. Honorable Speaker, standing order 91 speaks to the responsibility for statement of fact. And I've listened keenly to what the Honorable Mbui is saying. And Honorable Speaker, you did invite us to debate the finance bill. And it's only imperative on us that when we debate the finance bill, we restrict ourselves to facts that are in the finance bill and not use this opportunity, Honorable Speaker, to deliberately mislead the country or play to the gallery. And I know the Honorable Mwalimu Robert Mbui has been a good teacher and a good legislator. But to state that the question of turnover tax is what he is misleading the country to believe, knowing all too well, because he's a good teacher and he reads. He knows turnover tax is optional. You either choose to pay a turnover tax or you do your returns. True, Honorable Speaker.
Order. What is out of order, Majority Leader?
Honorable Speaker, what I found to be completely out of order.
Order. What is out of order?
Honorable Speaker, what I found to be complete out of order is the misleading statements that are not based on fact, that the Honorable Robert Mbui is advancing, and he should base his facts on what is in the bill.
Order. Order, honorable members. Robert Mbui, proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And please, Mr. Speaker, these frivolous points of order are just meant to waste time so that people cannot hear what we have to say. Mr. Speaker, I talked about things that are in the finance bill. Even the 3% turnover tax is in the finance bill, Mr. Speaker. And I said this, when will this House stand up to be counted? We are being controlled like puppets by the executive, Mr. Speaker. The executive stands and says they are going to watch how we vote. I don't know what will happen to us. Mr. Speaker, members of this House must ensure that the independence and the power of this House is respected so that we don't be taken for a ride. Mr. Speaker, the division of Kenyans by this executive has gone on for a very long time. They started with the issue of hustlers versus dynasties. They talked about companies, which I've had alluded to here, and shareholders and non-shareholders. Now we've also been told, oh, this bill, there's a fight between those who have salaries and those who do not have salaries. Mr. Speaker, we must make sure that we speak the truth. When you tell us that you want Kenyans to feel pain now, I don't know, they'll go to heaven soon or start enjoying themselves. It reminds me of Shakahola, Mr. Speaker. That is what the people of Shakahola told people. They told them, sell all your assets, come to us, starve and suffer in pain, then die and see heaven. Mr. Speaker, we do not want our hustlers to die. We will speak for them. They are suffering enough, Mr. Speaker. This bill, we cannot allow it to continue hurting them more than that, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, we have had a mention that Kenya is not highly taxed because I think, I don't know, Tunisia, Morocco, they are taxed more. Their tax to GDP is higher. How do you compare Kenya with some of those countries? The average salary in Tunisia is 176,000 a month. Average salary in South Africa is 187,000 a month. Average salary in Morocco is 263,000 shillings a month. The average salary of a Kenyan is 22,000 shillings. How do you compare light and day? Mr. Speaker, let us talk the truth. Mr. Speaker, you know, when I listened to this team when they were speaking during the Kenya Kwanza team during the campaigns, they talked about raising the hustlers. In this finance bill, there is a proposal to tax welfare groups. Welfare groups are those chamas of our women when they put money together, Mr. Speaker, so that they can do table banking. 1,000 shillings each, they put it together, then it is taken by one. Now this team wants to tax that money, take money that these women have worked hard for, the hustler women of this country, the mamamboga, the boda. Can you people be fair to Kenyans? Members, let us stand up and oppose this bill, all of us. The voters are watching. The voters are watching. And I can tell you, those three people that you are respecting so much, when you lose the next election, they will not pick your calls. And by that time, even these positions of cabinet, I don't know, CASs, we will have fought them, we will have removed them. They will no longer be there. So members, please, let us vote.
Order. Order, honorable members. In any civilized parliament, when you approve of what your colleague is saying, you thumb your feet. You thumb your feet. The way the minority leader is demonstrating. For those honorable colleagues who are here for the first time, this is not a rally. This is a parliament. So thumb your feet in approval and keep your silence in your disapproval. Mohamed Ali Jijopevu.
Asante sana Mheshimiwa Spika. Mimi nasimama kuunga mkono na vile vile nitaanza kwa kusema ya kwamba ni vyema sisi kama wabunge tuweze kujadili masuala ambayo yana umuhimu na taifa hili na wananchi wake. Ikiwa tutaanza kufanya mazungumzo ya kuleta uvumi na fitina, basi hatutakuwa tunasaidia mwananchi wa kawaida. Nikiangalia hii bill, Mheshimiwa Spika, na hili bunge lina wabunge wengi zaidi ya 300. Na asilimia kubwa ya wabunge ni wale ambao wako nje. Na hawa wabunge wakifika katika majukwaa wanaenda kuchochea wananchi pasi na kuwaambia ukweli. Kuna mbunge wetu kutoka upande wetu ambaye pia ameenda kuchochea wananchi, lakini leo katika bunge hili hayuko hapa kujadili haya masuala ya fedha ili kuwafanya Wakenya waweze kuelewa zaidi. Mheshimiwa Spika, hili taifa limekuwa taifa la ombaomba tangu Kenya kupata uhuru. Mwaka wa 1963 Kenya imekuwa ikiongozwa na masuala ya kukopa. Kila mwaka ni kukopa, kulipa wafanyikazi wa serikali, kukopa kuleta maendeleo, na ndio maana sasa imefika mahala ambapo tunataka kusema ya kwamba tutajinyima, tutajizuia na mikopo, tuanze kujifunza kutafuta hela miongoni mwa Wakenya na kujikomboa katika minyororo ya kukopa kila mwaka. Hili taifa hatuwezi kukopa mpaka kiyama. Hili taifa ni lazima tukaze minyororo, tufunge longi yetu vizuri na tuvae njuga, na tuhakikishe ya kwamba tutafanya haya mambo kwa miaka 2 ama 1 hivi, lakini mambo yatakuwa sawa. Mheshimiwa Spika, unataka vipi Kenya hii tujenge barabara wananchi wanataka? Mheshimiwa Spika, unataka vipi sisi leo tuweze kuunganisha umeme? Unataka vipi leo tuweze kupunguza bei ya vyakula ilhali tutaendelea kukopa kwa wazungu ili kuleta matatizo kwa Afrika? Ni lazima tujifunze na kustahimili. Mheshimiwa Spika, katika bunge hili leo, hawa wabunge wenzangu leo wana nguvu kwa sababu wao, kila mbunge kama sijakosea ana nyumba. Mheshimiwa Spika, wacha nizungumzie hili swala la nyumba kwa sababu linachukuliwa vibaya sana. Leo mbunge wa Kenya kila tama kiingia anachukua milioni 30 na kununua nyumba. Hawa wabunge wote, mimi pia binafsi nachukua hiyo pesa na kuhakikisha ya kwamba, Mheshimiwa Spika, nilinde. Mheshimiwa Spika, nilinde na haya maneno naosema. Hawa wabunge tuacheni ubinafsi kwa mara ya kwanza. Tufikirie hawa wananchi. Ni lazima tujinyime, ni lazima tujiadhibu ili tuweze kukomboa hawa wa Kenya. Leo unataka kupinga mswada, leo unataka kupinga bill kwa sababu ya kutafuta umaarufu, siasa za populism. Tunataka siasa za kukomboa taifa hili. Hatuwezi nyima maskini nyumba na wewe unajipatia nyumba kila mwaka.
I see nothing out of order. You'll get a chance to say something contrary to what he's saying. That is what debate is all about.
Mheshimiwa Spika, na naomba uniongezee dakika zingine 2 kwa sababu hawa watu wa Azimio wanapenda kupiga kelele mambo mazuri yakitajwa. Mheshimiwa Spika, nilikuwa nazungumzia, angalia katika hii bila, angalia Mheshimiwa Spika. Kwanza inapatia taifa hili uhuru wa kuwapatia nafasi wawekezaji waweze kuja katika taifa hili. Wawekezaji wengi wanaweza kuwekeza katika Nairobi, lakini wamepunguziwa kutoka 37.5 hadi 30% kwa masharti ya waende wawekeze maeneo mengine kama Bungoma, Mombasa, Garissa, sehemu ambazo hazina uwekezaji. Zikiwekezwa basi watoto wetu wanapata kazi, nchi inapata ushuru, nchi inapata nguvu ya kuweza kujikomboa. Angalieni mazuri ndani ya fedha hii. Kwa mfano, hii mambo ya 10% ambayo ina protect local market, ya kuhakikisha kwamba tunaenda katika jua kali sekta, tunanunua Kenya, tunanunua Ukenya ndani yetu na kuhakikisha tunainua viwanda vyetu. Angalieni yale mazuri yako ndani ya hii, msiangalie ubinafsi, msiangalie tamaa, msiangalie kuongozwa na viongozi ambao hawana dira ya uongozi. Kila mwaka ni kusumbua, kila mwaka ni kuambia.
Time is up. Women Rep Migori. Women Rep Migori, you are on the screen, or you are not ready. If you are not ready to speak, please take out your card from the screen to free for others. Go ahead, Women Rep Migori.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for giving me this opportunity. The minutes that you give me, sir, I request that I speak for 1 minute and donate a few to my colleague.
You cannot donate any time.
Thank you, sir. All the same, I'll speak.
Yes.
My opinion is this, and I speak as a member of parliament for Migori County. The committee has reported that they went round and the people of Kenya suggested that they bring it to 1.5, the housing levy. They are not being sincere unless they were doing this out of Kenya, but not in Kenya. Kenyans are saying 0. They don't want it. They are not interested. They are not aware of your 1.5. And I'm questioning this. If you are dishonest, even after speaking to wananchi, where is your honesty? Chair, you said that people told you that they want 1.5. Right now, I'm receiving calls and SMSs, and they're telling me, Fatuma, speak for us. In Migori County, Kenya at large, we are not aware of that 1.5. You never visited Migori. I believe you didn't visit anywhere other than your small offices. You sit there, take coffee, and make decisions for Kenya. We are telling you we are not interested in your levy. We want food on our tables. Our children are going hungry. We don't need houses. We are living in our grass thatched houses. We are comfortable with those houses. All we want is food. And as a youth, I'm telling you, shame who? Shame on you. I am not aware of your input. And I'm telling you, you should be ashamed. You are lying either for yourself or for your government. As the people of Kenya, as a youth, I am telling you, whatever you promised us in your agenda, keep your agenda and stop shaka-hollering us. We are not interested in your house. It will not even come even if we give you 100% levy. We know the truth that you don't keep your promises, and you're not going to twist us in this. Stop lying to Kenyans and face reality. Kenyans wamechoka. They are not interested in this house levy. They're asking for one request. Please give us food. Don't give us houses that do not exist. After all, as a Muslim, there is a golden house waiting for me in heaven. I don't need one from Kenya Kwanza. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Wakili Mureu. Wakili Mureu. Rendekeri.
Please. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I am not going to dwell on shouting and populism. I will go to the facts. Mr. Speaker, we are dignified members of this House, and we have a moral responsibility of guiding our thoughts and our future. Mr. Speaker, this committee is not made of tweets. It's made up of professionals who we believe have done a good job. They never sat anywhere taking coffee. They listened, and this member who has just spoken has expressed a lot of ignorance as a member of parliament. It's very unfortunate that we can continue saying our people can continue staying in that house. Mr. Speaker, on the issue of housing, I am the vice chair of housing, and I'm not ashamed of standing here to say I am so impressed by the outcome of this amendment. Mr. Speaker, this clause addresses the need for housing in slums, which are in Nairobi, Kisumu, Mombasa, Eldoret, and Nakuru. Mr. Speaker, we are members of parliament in these chambers who are leading constituencies where 50% of their residents stay in slums. What we are trying to do and what the Kenya government is doing is to uplift the standard of these people according to Article 43 of our Constitution. Mr. Speaker, these people who are talking and condemning the housing factor, they refer the need to go back to our Constitution. How are we going to realize giving clean environment and sanitation if we cannot raise money? We should not deceive ourselves. I think the politics of populism, I am shocked. Even the members of parliament for Kasalani, Madale, Kebela, they are all seated here shouting and condemning the people who they are reading. And you are sitting, you are staying in a 5-bedroom house, 5-star house, and here you are, the government is giving a long-term solution to the problem, yet you are here trying to teach us on how to think. We are not going to think that way. We want to have a future for our people. Mr. Speaker, we want to create affordable housing for our children and the generation to come. We have to have a fund that is going to do this. Mr. Speaker, this bill is not only creating houses, it's also creating employment for our children. That is the concept of housing. It is going to make utilization of our local resources, and it's going to enhance manufacturing, and it's going to create businessmen. So we are dealing with a very global and major issue, not the trivial aspect of just the shelter. Mr. Speaker, the finance bill has addressed the issue that every Kenyan is saying, Mama Mboga want road, Mama Mboga want education, Mama Mboga want electricity, Mama Omboga want health services. How is the government going to provide this if we are not going to raise money? The former government utilized our coffers when they were exiting, and the people in front leading the Azimio Brigade, they are the same battalion that took off with the money that was left at the treasury. Shame for you to stand there and tell Kenyans that the living standard. Listen, you took a lot of debts. You left this country in debt. Now, where do you think the money is going to come from? Mr. Speaker, we are pretenders of the greatest honor. There is no way that we are going to lower the standard of living for Kenyans if we don't increase productivity. Productivity cannot come as if there is no money put in the investment in terms of agriculture and support services. So let's engage on issues. Let's not engage on populism. My friend, Mr. Bui, I was not born in parliament, but I want to be counted as one person who, I want to be counted as one person who...
Yes, Robert Mbui, what's the problem?
Honorable Speaker, we are debating the finance bill. And it is very shocking for the honorable member who was on the floor, the Honorable Indikiri, to start lecturing me and mentioning my name. Mr. Speaker, here it's about debate, it's about the finance bill. Whatever emotions you have, please do not, I think, protect me, Mr. Speaker.
Mr. Speaker, I will call him Walim. It does.
Order in the Kiri, to be fair, Robert Mbui, nothing personal. You have already contributed, and even Kathy has referred to you as my friend Robert Mbui to counter your argument. That's part of debate. Rindikiri.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. So we are saying this issue of address of cost of living is a shame to tell people that cost of living will just come from heaven. Nothing. We have to increase productivity. We have to raise money to put in agriculture. We have to raise money to put in manufacturing. We have to put money in value addition. That is why we are going to address the issue of cost of living. The others, my friends, and good people, you know inside yourself, you are not playing to the...
Minority Leader.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. And let me state from the outset that I stand to oppose and to oppose vehemently this bill. Mr. Speaker, I have been here long enough now, and I can tell you, this is the first time we have come across a bill proposed by the regime in power, a bill that is totally insensitive to the plight of the people. Mr. Speaker, how deceitful can we be? How can you go around the country promising hapless Kenyans, poor Kenyans, heaven, and yet 6-7 months down the road, you come up with a bill that essentially seeks to choke them to death? Mr. Speaker, how can it be possible on earth, Mr. Speaker, that a government can forget about the people, the very people it's supposed to protect, and turn around to actually kill them, literally, Mr. Speaker? Mr. Speaker, it is also the first time that I've witnessed a situation where a bill is being introduced in this House, and somebody, a head of a political party which is in power, issuing threats, open threats to members of parliament, that unless you vote in this direction, you will see. That unless you vote for this bill, you will be in problem. That unless you toe the line, you will know who I am. Mr. Speaker, in which country are we living, Mr. Speaker? If this is not dictatorship, what then is dictatorship, Mr. Speaker? Mr. Speaker, going through this bill, Mr. Speaker, what is that on?
There's a point of order from your colleague.
Honorable Speaker, is it in order for the minority leader to mislead the House that His Excellency the President has said that if you do not pass the bill, you'll know who I am? Can he be able to substantiate those claims, Honorable Speaker?
At no time did he mention
it is actually Tinga that said that, Honorable Speaker.
Order, honorable members. Avoid unhelpful insinuations. The Honorable Minority Leader at no time mentioned the President. He probably is meaning Ichungu or somebody else. Let him continue with his argument.
Mr. Speaker, as usual, I will ignore the Honorable Soro. Mr. Speaker, going through this bill, you see an attempt to not only ridicule the hustlers or the poor Kenyans, but to actually kill them. Why do I say so? Mr. Speaker, we all know that this country lies solely on fuel and petroleum products. Every facet of the economy is driven by fuel and petroleum products. And therefore, the moment you set out to increase VAT on fuel and petroleum products from 8 to 16%, you essentially mean that life, the cost of living, is going to skyrocket automatically. Everything in life is going to become more costly, Mr. Speaker. And then you go ahead and remove tax on aircraft, choppers, and spare parts for those funny items. Equipment that are only bought or accessed by the who is who, by the very rich in this country. On the one hand, you overburden the poor person. On the other hand, you lessen the burden on the rich person. So what logic is this, Mr. Speaker? Mr. Speaker, I would have expected, having heard the regime lament that they found empty coffers, I would have expected, and any first-year economics student will tell you, that the logical step the regime should have taken was rationalize the budget, and cut off those areas that are not necessary. But what do you see? The budget has now increased by about 80-something billion shillings, over and above last year's budget. But the increment is driven by consumption. You see the money allocated to the office of the president, the money allocated to the office of the deputy president, the money allocated to the office of the Prime cabinet, whatever. Monies that are going to service consumption, to host banquets, to buy flowers, to buy tea, Mr. Speaker. This is a perfect case of a regime which is living on a different universe, not on earth, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, you can go on and on. Take the case of the housing levy. Up to now, including, and I let it very clear to my good friend, Honorable Kimani Kuria. Up to now, they have refused to define what this animal is. We do not know whether it is a levy, it's a tax, it is a fine, it's a penalty. Nobody knows, Mr. Speaker. And then they come here and want to tell us that they have reduced it from 3% to 1.5%. Mr. Speaker, they have even worsened the situation now. The situation has now worsened because the cap which was there initially of 2,500 has been removed. Now they have targeted even those who are earning bigger salaries more. Now they have attacked the low person, the middle person, and the higher person. Mr. Speaker, let me tell you, in the village where I come from, we have got public servants. We have got employees who have toiled for years. Some of them are left with about 5 years to retire. They have got their own houses, which they have built through different schemes. You want to tell them to part with 1.5% of their pay, Mr. Speaker, to deposit in a scheme who nobody knows the intention about. Mr. Speaker, if you did just basic calculation, this 1.5% of an ordinary primary school teacher salary, he will need not less than 200 years to be able to acquire a house. And yet this person is retiring in 5 years' time. So tell me, who is he saving for? Who is he buying this house for? Is his grandchildren, great-grandchildren, or who, Mr. Speaker? Nobody is coming up to give us answers to those very basic questions. And yet, to that poor Kenyan worker in the village, that 1.5%, which you are forcing him to fork out can mean a difference between starving to death or surviving. The Speaker, that poor Kenyan worker in the village, or even here in Nairobi, depends on that 1.5% of his salary to put food on the table for his children, to buy a uniform for his school for his children, to pay school fees for his children, to actually pay all the bills that he incurs in his day-to-day life, Mr. Speaker. And therefore, this is one of those schemes. In fact, I would want to equate it to a pyramid scheme. Mr. Speaker, this housing levy, or whatever they call it, is a perfect case of a pyramid scheme. And Kenyans must say no. They have already said no, resoundingly, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, you can go on and on. You can go on and on. Look at the case of poor Kenyan women and girls, and including even boys, who depend on the business of saloons, kinyozi, and what have you. What have they done to them? They have imposed an excise duty on human hair, wigs, false beards, eyebrows, eyelashes, artificial nails. Mr. Speaker, these people have a bone to pick with poor Kenyans. They don't want our women to be beautiful. They don't want our men to be well kept, Mr. Speaker. They are basically strangulating every other poor Kenyan who is struggling. Mr. Speaker, as we speak, those saloons, those kinyozis employ hundreds of thousands of Kenyans. Hundreds of thousands of Kenyans are employed and depend on those kinyozis, those saloons. If you come out and impose such taxes, you are essentially telling them to go back to and engage in other nefarious activities, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, you cannot be on one hand condemning alcoholism and drugs and so on and so forth, and on the other hand, you are removing people from gainful employment and throwing them to the wilderness. What a contradiction is that, Mr. Speaker? Mr. Speaker, this bill, as I conclude, Mr. Speaker, as we sit here today, and as we debate in this very magnificent chamber, Kenyans are watching out there. In fact, I have received since 1 hour ago, not less than 200 messages from Kenyans who are watching us. It is therefore incumbent upon us to choose where we want to stand. Do we want to stand on the right side of history or on the wrong side of history as a house? Because Kenyans are watching. Do you want to side with the oppressors who have brought this bill, or do you want to stand with the poor Kenyans? The choice is ours. At the end of the day, it will be neither the issue of Kenya Kwanza or Azimio. It will be the issue of what position did a leader take at the hour of need. What stand did you take at the hour of need for Kenyans? Speaker, they are watching, and it will not matter whether you vote yes or no, and whether yes wins or not. What will matter is where are you standing as a leader of the people of Kenya. The Speaker, in this country, we are used to giving empty and lofty promises, and then we forget about them soon after elections. This time around, the mood I am seeing out there, and I am very often at home, Mr. Speaker, the mood out there is that this bill is a make or break point. This bill can actually spark a serious revolution in this country. This bill, I want to caution you, this bill can actually be the spark that will lead a revolution that will never be ended. And it's going to be a revolution of the proletariat, Mr. Speaker. It's going to be a revolution led by the poor hustlers, Mr. Speaker, because they have had enough. They have had enough of lies. They have had enough of this chest stamping. They have had enough of this bravado. That hour of reckoning has now come. And therefore, I want to say this, that even as we stand here to please our masters out there, our masters who are watching us, you must understand that the bigger, greater masters are the people who voted us, not those who imposed us on these positions. Mr. Speaker, this House cannot go down in history as a House which disregarded the plight of the people. This House must go down in history as a House which stood with the people at their hour of need. And with those very many remarks, Mr. Speaker, I oppose in totality. Thank you.
Ndindi Nyoro.
Thank you very much, Honorable Speaker, for a chance to contribute in regards to the finance bill. And of course, I rise to support. And Mr. Speaker, I would want to take this opportunity to contextualize the debate you are having and the ramifications of this debate. Mr. Speaker, we just debated our estimates, which we concluded through the Committee of Supply yesterday. Mr. Speaker, we read a budget of 3.679 trillion Kenya shillings, and that is the correct figure. We are not adding our budget by the other figures I'm hearing flying around. Our budget is actually precisely 3.67 trillion Kenya shillings. Honorable Speaker, I want to contextualize because the work of the Finance Bill and the Finance Committee, of course, together with the Debt Committee, is to fill in the revenue side of the budget. And what we did yesterday and we have been doing is the expenditure side of the budget. Honorable Speaker, any government have only 4 areas of raising revenue. That is the ordinary revenue, the A in A, the grants, and Honorable Speaker, if we have privatization. Honorable Speaker, the current budget as it is, our revenue side, 2.57 trillion Kenya shillings is ordinary revenue. 347 billion Kenya shillings is appropriations in aid. Honorable Speaker, 42 billion is the grant. And therefore that gives a deficit, a much lower deficit from what we had last year, now at 718, 720 billion thereabout. On the expenditure side, because I want to contextualize, Honorable Speaker, 2.3 billion Kenya shillings is the expenditure of the national government, which incorporates the parliament and the judiciary. Honorable Speaker, we also budgeted for 986 billion Kenya shillings in CFS in payment of our debts and especially the interest rate. Honorable Speaker, we also budgeted for Kenya shillings 385 billion that will be sending to our counties as equitable share. Why am I giving all this detail, Honorable Speaker? This House has a choice to make. Honorable Speaker, we passed the estimates of the coming financial year. And what is it that we want to achieve so that we contextualize and we put on the same platform on what kind of amount of money do we actually need? Honorable Speaker, whatever I have enumerated on the revenue side and the expenditure side balances. And therefore, any variation on the revenue side has to have a corresponding effect on the expenditure side. Honorable Speaker, out of the 3.679 trillion Kenya shillings, we are spending the same taxes we are collecting, the same revenue we are collecting through the finance side of the budget. Honorable Speaker, 630 billion Kenya shillings is going to the education of the Kenyan children. Honorable Speaker, through this budget, and of course being supplied by the resources from the finance bill, we have been able to add an extra 10 billion Kenya shillings to those of us who are in JSS, junior secondary schools, Honorable Speaker, to capitalize the students. Honorable Speaker, through the same revenue that we are collecting, we have been able to double our HELB allocation from this exiting year of 15 billion to 30 billion Kenya shillings, Honorable Speaker. Honorable Speaker, through the same revenue, we have been able to add Kenya shillings 10 billion to NGCDF, Honorable Speaker, where every constituency will be receiving 25 million to 45 million, depending on the formula, in the next financial year. Honorable Speaker, we have been able to add and actually double the amount of money we give to Public Service Commission in terms of hiring interns. Next year, Honorable Speaker, we are going to hire 8,000 interns instead of the 4,000 that we hired this financial year. Honorable Speaker, we have been able to allocate 249 billion Kenya shillings to our roads. We have been able to give our farmers fertilizer. The question that we must ask as this House, as we debate the finance bill, what is it that we have a problem with in terms of the expenditure? Honorable Speaker, we have to support the revenue side of the budget because, Honorable Speaker, that is where we draw the resources to be able to take our Kenya forward through infrastructure and any other kind of development that we are undertaking. Honorable Speaker, I support 100%.
Thank you, Ndindi Nyoro. The Honorable Masara. Give Honorable Masara the mic.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you for giving me this opportunity to contribute to this bill, Finance Bill of 2023. Mr. Speaker, first, I want to appreciate the Kenyan people. For the first time in the history, they have really participated and contributed towards this contribution. This is where we have seen and Kenyans have exhibited public participation. I want to encourage all Kenyans to be doing this in every bill so that they can participate in how they are being governed. Mr. Speaker, having said that, first, I want to say that I want to correct an impression which was given by my friend, Honorable Mohammed Hali. The mortgage we are being given as MP, we pay for it plus interest. It's not a free money for us. It is being deducted from our salaries. Therefore, somebody should not say that we are tukona ubinafsi. It is a right we have been given as member of parliament, and we pay for it from our salaries. Mr. Speaker, I want also correct people who have said that we cannot continue borrowing. America is a very stable economy. Japan is a stable economy. But if you compare their GDP plus the debt portfolio, they borrow, but they utilize their borrowing well. To an extent, they give other countries their money which they have borrowed. Therefore, this country can continue borrowing, but what we must do is we must utilize the money we borrow to trigger development in the economy. That time, that borrowing will help the economy. Mr. Speaker, on this particular bill, I want to say this. On Article 28, Clause 28 of the bill, concerning fuel, Mr. Speaker, fuel is a factor of production. If you increase the prices of fuel, all other things will increase. It means those who are doing production will increase the prices of items. This bill, I agree also with my chairman of budget, that budget must be financed. But the timing is bad, Mr. Speaker. As we speak today, Kenyans cannot afford 3 meals per day. They are taking 2 meal breakfast and supper, and some are only taking 1 meal. Therefore, if you increase any tax, actually the government is not going to realize the objective because the purchasing power has gone down. So even if you say you are paying 16%, people will no longer use their vehicles. People will use matatu. It means the vehicles will be parked at home. Therefore, you'll be collecting less revenue. Mr. Speaker, if you read today's Nation, it is talking about the number of billionaires who have left the country because of high tax. If we pass this bill in entirety the way it is, so many investors and manufacturers and people can contribute to the development of this country are going to leave this country and produce elsewhere. Therefore, what I'm suggesting that the budget must be financed. But why must we employ a governor who has served 2 terms, who has pension, to be a CAS? That's a question I'm asking myself. Why should we employ an MP who has served 3 terms, who is earning pension, to be a CAS? Do we really need them? My proposal for this country is that let us put our priorities right.
and caution the current population for the time being until the economy stabilizes. I believe, and I'm a strong believer, that we must pay tax. But people who pay tax and they get development for the tax they pay usually celebrate when they pay tax. But if we can pay tax to pay two-term governors money, that one would be injustice to the people of Kenya. Mr. Speaker, if you read in front of you, for the welfare of the society and the just government of the people, will we be really just if we overtax our people in a time when they really need us? I want to be in the right side of history that the timing is bad. Let us look for ways of financing the budget by reducing expenditure, sealing loopholes of corruption, and then putting our priorities right, and we are going to finance the budget. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Dr. Chikati. Give Dr. Chikati the mic.
Here I am. Thank you. Mr. Speaker, I just want to give the summary picture of the outlook of the finance bill. And so, first of all, Mr. Speaker, the way I understand it, overall it seeks to boost the ordinary revenue as a share of GDP to 25%. And I'll give the summary picture because of time. It also seeks to increase tax compliance rate from 70 to 90%. As you know, one of the challenges facing Kenyans is the issue of tax compliance, Mr. Speaker. Thirdly, Mr. Speaker, the bill seeks to address the issue of counterfeits and expand the tax base. And the issue of counterfeits and tax evasion is a big challenge to the Kenyan community. Fourthly, Mr. Speaker, it seeks to address the issue of debt repayment and help the government to gradually reduce overall government expenditure through elimination of non-priority expenditures, elimination of consumption subsidies, use of private-public partnership in rolling out e-procurement systems and other measures. Mr. Speaker, the bill overall seeks to mobilize resources to help finance deficit, which arises out of expenditure that exceeds our revenue. So in summary, Mr. Speaker, I will support the bill. Thank you.
Otiende Amolo.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I oppose this bill in entirety, and I submit that this bill is irredeemably and irretrievably bad and inimical to the well-being of Kenyans at large. Mr. Speaker, that is actually essentially conceded by the chair of the committee, because you realize, Mr. Speaker, that in moving the bill, he actually ended up moving the report rather than the bill. And he essentially dwelled so much on the things to be removed from the bill rather than the contents of the bill. That means, Mr. Speaker, that the right thing to do is to reject the bill so that we go back to the drawing board. Alternatively, they withdraw it and put all those things in the bill that they will bring. Because to say we intend to is a wish proposition. There is no assurance that it will be done. Mr. Speaker, 90% of Kenyans have rejected this bill. 90%. And the majority of all those who submitted their memos have also rejected this bill. Mr. Speaker, it's for a very simple reason. And the reason is this. Excessive
Mr. Speaker, I stand on, we have a responsibility to, wait, calm down. I stand on standing order number 95A, and I want to know whether Honorable Otiende Omolo, with all due respect, when he says and stands on national TV, here in Parliament, where we are broadcasting live, and says that 90% of Kenyans are opposed to this bill. What statistics has he laid on this table to say that he has done a research and found out that 90%, because, 90%, Mr. Speaker, is mathematics. These are numbers, and numbers do not lie. You must be responsible of the statement that you place on this table. So, Mr. Speaker, please, let him substantiate where he has gotten the figures of 90% from.
Proceed, Atienda Molo. Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, that objection is symptomatic to the problem this side is having. They don't listen to the radio stations, they don't read the printed media, they don't watch TV stations. If they did, they would not ask that question.
Order,
Let me continue, Mr. Speaker.
Otienda Molo,
Mr.
order.
Speaker.
Otienda Molo, you are normally more balanced than that. Kagombe cannot be the side. He's an individual.
Speaker, I'll proceed.
Yes.
Mr. Speaker, the point I'm making is that excessive and generalized overtaxation of Kenyans will only further burden Kenyans who are already suffering. The cost of living is so high, and therefore it's a lie to say that you want this budget to pass in order to alleviate the suffering of Kenyans. Mr. Speaker, I wish to submit that there are only 3 answers to the problems we have right now. 1, austerity measures. 2, reduction of corruption. And 3, rationalization of government. Mr. Speaker, I do not understand how a government that says that already there's a problem insists on increasing the overall budget from 3.3 trillion, which it was in the previous year, to 3.67 trillion, if you admit there's no money. What is the principle? If you have no money, you cut your coat according to size. So you don't say that you must increase it and therefore you must overtax. Secondly, Mr. Speaker, how does a government that says we are short of money explain why you must create offices that we do not need? You do not need the office of the Prime Cabinet Secretary. You do not need all the 24 cabinet offices. The Constitution allows you a minimum of 14. You do not need over 51 principal secretaries. You do not need over 50 CSS. And all these are taking public money. If you say, and it is unfortunate that a member of parliament should seek to mislead the public by saying that members of parliament already get money for houses, that is not true, because it is a loan that we pay at 3%. But if that is your position, then take away that free house, because we don't have it. Don't tax Kenyans on it. Mr. Speaker, corruption, corruption, corruption. In all these words, the word anti-corruption you will never hear from the words of those who speak for the government side. In fact, you only see the demonstration of those who are facing corruption charges being withdrawn. It is on record from the previous president that we lose 2 billion shillings every day to corruption. If we could even just reduce that to 1 billion, we would fix the gap that they are talking about in government. Then there's rationalization, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, you are aware, and this House has debated, in the previous parliament, there was a report that suggested that we do not need the over 530 ministries and departments of government that we have, the parastotals. Most of them are duplicative, and it was suggested that we should reduce them to barely 50. Instead of reducing them, we have a situation where we are sustaining even those which were moribund, those which were not working. We are giving opportunity to others to earn a living. Mr. Speaker, as I finish, Mr. Speaker, my 2 minutes were taken. Can I get my 2 minutes back, please? My 2 minutes. Yes. Mr. Speaker, 2 closing remarks. You must listen to us, because even if you use the majority to pass this, there's still the courts. And even if you deal with the courts, there's still the people who are sovereign. 2 things. 1, you cannot have a situation where you are bringing the housing tax here. I want to invite you to note, first of all, that under Schedule 6, the role of housing is for the counties, it's not for the national government. And I invite you to look at Clause 8D. The national government is only to do the housing policy. So when you are bringing the question of housing and you're introducing the tax, you're actually amending the Constitution through the back door. And it also means then that this bill should go to the Senate, because the Senate must have a role in anything that affects the counties. And that is a point that you need to bear in mind. Lastly, it is a matter of the Constitution that you cannot introduce servitude. by telling someone that they must pay tax, which will not benefit them and will go to the shareholders, as your leaders have told us, that is servitude. Servitude that we must reject, and we must reject this bill in totality. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Dr. Mola. Members, before I give the next speaker, allow me to acknowledge the following institutions in the public and speakers gallery. Tender Care School, Embakasi East, Nairobi. Ontulilu Boys School, Buri, Meru. Moi Girls High School, Nairobi, Kibra. Sitam Schools, Makadara. Kongoi Secondary School, Kuresoi North, Nakuru. Mary Emase.
Thank you, Chair, for this opportunity to contribute to this motion on the finance bill. Honorable Speaker, this is a very important bill, and members, I want to urge that we debate soberly and objectively, devoid of any emotions. And secondly, Honorable Speaker, as we discuss the finance bill, we cannot discuss the finance bill in isolation. We need to look at the entire equation holistically. Look at the budget and look at the finance bill. And I'm happy that members agree that we must raise money to finance the budget. And that is what the finance bill is all about. It proposes measures to raise money to finance the budget. So when I listen to members say that this bill does not in any way improve or should be rejected, and I look at you and I wonder, did you listen to the discussion on the budget and where we are proposing to distribute this money to? So for me, Honorable Speaker, I want to say that we must make a decision. It is a hard decision, but this is our country. We live here, and we have to make it a better country. And therefore, we must make a decision. And the elephant in the house is the chairman of the budget has just reminded us on the figures, what our budget is. And we know how we borrowed heavily in the past, and that is what brings us to the state in which we are today. 60% of our revenue goes towards paying the loans that we owe. And therefore, we can decide to choose. We talk of subsidies to continue. We talk of less taxes. Yes, you can choose to go that direction. But the question you should ask yourself, for how long shall you be able to sustain the subsidies? And I hear people saying, when we reduce taxes and we continue to give subsidy, we attract more investment, and then the country is able to grow. I want to ask you, reducing taxes is just one of the factors, but there are so many other factors of production. You will need to provide accessibility, that's the road. You may need to provide electricity and many other factors. So it is not automatic by reducing taxes that we shall be able to spur growth and improve things. So, Honorable Speaker, I want to say on this finance bill, as I support it, that I support the position by Kenya Kwanza, that we need to raise more taxes ourselves as a country and borrow less, so that by doing that, we are able to actually allocate money to core sectors of the economy. In fact, the question we should be asking ourselves are questions on accountability, are questions on austerity measures, are questions on how do we fight corruption, so that together we're able to raise them. And that is why we saw in our budget that we are allocating money to go to the sectors like agriculture, so that we are able to increase production. And therefore, ultimately, the forces of demand and supply will help bring down the cost of goods and cost of living. We are putting money to sectors like digitization, industrialization, so that we're able to create employment opportunities for our children. So the finance bill in entirety is not a bad thing. And Mr. Speaker, I want to support this finance bill. And I've listened to members contributing. I was expecting members will say, I do not like this is not for Kenya, and this is what I'm proposing. I want to commend Honorable Masara. It's only Honorable Masara who has said, this is bad. I propose, probably we shouldn't have done A, B, and C. So, Honorable Speaker, I want to thank the committee. It has not been easy. They have tried. And in particular, I see they have listened to Kenyans. They are proposing some reductions, like on the 3%. They are reducing it to 1.5. Probably the only thing I would want to request the chair as he replies to expound more on the difference between moving from mandatory contribution to a levy. And also, when you look at clause 76, they have, that was clause 76. So when you look at clause 36, they have also proposed to remove the 20% mandatory deposit for those companies or individuals that were seeking who had issues with the tax payments or taxes that are being demanded. That was demanded that they needed to pay deposit in court. So.
Thank you, Honorable Mary Mase. Member for Kaloleni. Kaloleni, Katana. Kahindi, Katana.
Asante Bwana Spika kwa kunipatia muda huu. Asante Bwana Spika kwa kunipatia muda huu niweze kuchangia kwa mswada huu wa kifedha wa mwaka 2023. Mimi napinga mswada huu kwa yale yafuatayo. Bwana Spika, gharama ya maisha imepanda kiwango kikubwa zaidi. Na gharama hizi hazijui ni nani yuko upinzani na ni nani yuko ndani ya serikali. Tabu hizi tunazipata sote kama Wakenya. Bwana Spika, ukiangalia ile nyongeza ambayo inataka kuwekwa kwa mafuta, ukiongeza ushuru kwa mafuta, kila kitu kinapanda. Na anayeumia zaidi ni yule ambaye alikuwa akiongelewa, mama mboga, bodaboda, kwa sababu hakuna tofauti ya mama mboga na bodaboda na mbunge hata na rais. Kama ni bei ya mafuta, Bwana Spika, tunanunua lita moja kwa bei sawia. Bwana Spika, wakati serikali ilipoingia walisema gharama ya unga itashuka chini. Wakasema gharama ya bidhaa muhimu zitashuka chini. Lakini kufikia sasa, Bwana Spika, gharama zimepanda maradufu. Unajua kikwetu, Bwana Spika, utajua dalili za kwamba huyu bwana ana mbegu za kuzalisha. Na kama hana, utajua. Haina haja utangazie kila mtu. Yule babako ameketi pale nyumbani, Bwana Spika, akiona mkaza mwana ameanza kutema mate, anajua ni dalili kwamba kumefanyika kitu. Anatarajia mjukuu. Lakini serikali hii ambayo ipo, hatuoni dalili za kutema mate. Ni kutangaza kila siku, bibi yangu ana mimba, na tukiangalia hatuoni ile mimba. Ni kuhadaiwa. Kwa hivyo, Bwana Spika, ile tunasema ni kwamba serikali ilisema itahakikisha gharama za maisha zitashuka chini. Hapo sisi ndo tunasema, na mwananchi amesema hatuwezi kuongeza ushuru ili kufanya gharama ya maisha iende chini. Serikali inatakikana kuangalia yule mwananchi alikuwa anasema anamtetea, ili aweze kupata nafuu. Bwana Spika, sisi ambao tuko mashinani, hata wale wabunge ambao kwa serikali, imekuwa ni vigumu hata kwenda mashinani kuonana na watu, kwa sababu sisi wenyewe hela hatuna mifukoni. Tutawasaidia vipi wale watu wetu? Na hii dhana ya kusema kwamba ati wabunge wanapewa pesa za kununua nyumba, ule ni mkopo, tunakopeshwa na tunalipa na riba. Kwa hivyo mimi sahihi, Bwana Spika, unajua nimechukua mkopo wa nyumba na ninakatiwa katika mshahara wangu. Hii nyumba inalazimishwa kulala ni nyumba gani? Hii ingekuwa inakatiwa kwa hiari, yule ambaye anataka akatiwe alipe nyumba, yule ambaye yuko na nyumba afanye shughuli nyingine na zile pesa zake, aweze kufanya, aezekee ili aweze kuongeza biashara yake. Bwana Spika, ingekuwa vyema badala ya kupunguza ushuru wa nyumba wangepunguza ushuru wa mafuta, gharama ya maisha ingefanya nini? Ingeshuka chini. Lakini angalia ule bodaboda ambaye alikuwa akizungumziwa, na kama ni ahadi, serikali hii imeahidi vya kutosha. Serikali hii imeahidi vya kutosha, na kama ni kulaumu pia imelaumu vya kutosha. Kile tunachotaka sahihi ni kuhakikisha gharama ya maisha inarudi chini. Bwana Spika, tunapoenda mbele itakuwa ni vigumu hata ongezeko la watu kufanyika hapa nchini, kwa sababu wavulana hawana pesa ya kuoa, hawachipi.
Silvano Zosoro.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. Honorable Speaker, from the onset, I want to support the report by the Finance Committee in regard to this finance bill. Honorable Speaker, I want to restrict myself to the housing thing. Honorable Speaker, I once asked my grandfather where he was when his peers were being allocated huge tracts of land, across the Gusii region. And he told me that at that point, it didn't matter to him, to own huge tracts of land, because he couldn't imagine that at some point population will grow. He couldn't imagine that at some point land will be inadequate. That is the challenge we are also facing as far as the housing matter is concerned. It is for that reason, Honorable Speaker, that today, even as a member of parliament, my house sits in a 50 by 100 piece of land. And that is my area in Gusii area. Because of the carelessness and the don't care attitude my forefathers had as far as land allocation is concerned. Honorable Speaker, it is prerogative of every government to think and create structures that define the future of a country. I get surprised, Honorable Speaker, that we are seated here just talking about matters of today, talking about matters of now, not imagining what will befall this country as populations grow day in, day out in another 20, 30 years. When members of parliament rise on their seats, telling people that housing matter is not necessary, it is not a necessity, when we all know that it is important to have food, yes. It is important to have clothing, yes. But it's also important to have shelter. And that is what this government is talking about. And when you talk about importance of having food, this very finance bill has catered for that. And that is why we are talking about zero rating taxation on the farm inputs. In another few days or so, food production will be low in terms, the cost of food, cost of producing food will be low, food will be adequate, people will have a lot of energy, but they will not have shelter. And that is what we are saying today, Honorable Speaker, that it is important for us to pass this finance bill. As far as if there is nothing else that we need to be thinking about, then let's think about this housing thing. I imagine back in my area, and I keep saying this, that Gusii, Honorable Speaker, is turning to be a village slum. There is no land, but there are some pieces of land owned by government. And that is what we want to make use of. We are telling the members of the public that even as we think about today, in another 30 years or 20 or so, we'll need now to imagine the urbanization, because Kenya is largely urban in terms of, in nature. Everyone is moving urban. But now we are telling the people this way, that through this finance bill, you will be able to have structures built by government in your own sub-counties, so that in the inadequacy of land, it does not really affect you. Your people will have shelter. Because of the zero rating in terms of the farm inputs, your people will have food, then people will live very okay. And that is the essence of the finance bill. But Honorable Speaker, listening to my colleagues from the minority side, and I listened keenly to Honorable Tienda Molo, when he raised issue in terms of, cutting down the costs, the budget appropriation. But I get surprised, Honorable Speaker. We stayed here yesterday until 10 p.m. None of the members, not a single member of the minority was in this house to challenge the Committee of Supply when we were doing allocation, except Oluoch. Except Oluoch. It is in this house that we allocate and reallocate funds. If you wanted to cut down the budget, if you wanted to downsize the surplus of a certain particular...
Also be fair to Beatrice Elachi, she was here up to the end of time.
I stand guided, Honorable Speaker. Yes. I was, of course, with Beatrice Elachi and Honorable Oluoch. But all the rest were not here. You are talking about cutting down the budget as far as appropriation is concerned. That is a prerogative of this House. You were not here, Honorable Tienda Molo. So who else do you want to cut down that budget if you are not here? You are complaining that we are, collecting money left, right, and center. But we passed that budget here. We passed the surplus here. It is a shame. It is a complete shame, Honorable Speaker. And it is important for Kenyans to know that the budget is pushed through your taxes. And that is what the essence of this finance bill is all about. The budget...
Give him 1 minute.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. It is through this finance bill that we're able to display where collection of money, collection of revenue is going to come from. When we passed the budget yesterday, we are justifying our collection, our source of income through this finance bill. So even as you challenge the finance bill, ask yourself, what element of this Committee of Supply did you challenge yesterday in the Committee of Supply? None. You are telling us to borrow. How do we borrow? To what extent can this country borrow? Do you want us to go to the Ghana way? How do you say that you are defending the content creators? But we've displayed to you, we've been able to reduce their taxation from 15%, to less than 10%. I mean, really, why do you want to play populist politics when you also need salaries? You know very well that your classes need to be built. Your road needs to be done. You are here shouting about CDF. Where do you want money to...
The Honorable Dr. Jackson Kosgei. Jackson Kosgei.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for giving me this opportunity. On the onset, as I present my thoughts to this august House, I wish to say I support the motion. At independence, Mr. Speaker, our founding fathers had a conversation. Where do we take our newly independent countries moving forward? And the discussion they had was that we develop a philosophy not founded on the Western capitalism purely, or the Eastern socialism, but they looked at what they called an African democratic socialism. It had three thematics, Mr. Speaker, that we want to develop Africa with an equitable economic development. Second, they talked about an inclusive formation of our social structure. And they developed three strategic philosophies that informed our sessional paper, 1965. They talked about that in this, we need to build an economy, as they were addressing a financial appeal like today, an economy that will promote a self-reliance, promote national unity, and also national development by pooling our resources. I am a son of a veteran war soldier in 1945. He told me when I caught polio that, son, now that you have lost your legs, you have a challenge.
But let me tell you, you have no option but to improve upward. Never become a victim of paralysis by analysis. If we think Africa is poor and we continue to say we are poor, we will be paralyzed. We must look for a solution, Mr. Speaker. And therefore, I wish to encourage us as leaders that we would like to be self-reliant as a country. And the best thing to do is to look at what we have to improve our nation. And therefore, I support this budget, which is bold, encouraging an African to be independent. Other details about how to elevate our situation has had some other mitigation given out in the country. So let us not send a message to the Kenyan people that we are done. We are not. We are able to rise up again after the Mr. Speaker. So I encourage this House, we support this bill without intimidating our own country. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Dr. Kosgei. Peter Kaluma.
I thank you, Honorable Speaker, for this opportunity. Honorable Speaker, the main reason why parliaments exist in the world is on the doctrine that there can be no taxation without representation. And so I want to beg to remind both sides of the House that once this finance bill is passed, it will not be anybody. It will be you who taxed the Kenyans. And that is why you are elected directly by those Kenyans. Honorable Speaker, I have a problem with what is in clause 2 in terms of definition of person, and I know the chair for the committee is listening. My interpretation of what is in clause 2, if you read it together with section 26, subsection 5 of the Tax Act referred, includes everybody. Everybody, possibly in terms of the definition under that section 26, section 5, it includes your ancestors. And I fear if we don't look at it again, you will have a situation where in definition of person, you will be obligated to take over the tax obligations of your relative, including the dead one. So I want to request the Finance Committee to look at this as we proceed to the Committee of the Whole House. Honorable Speaker, I have an issue with what is at clause 36. And my view, Honorable Speaker, is that this would fundamentally deny people access to justice. Honorable members, particularly approaching elections, even in the last elections, Honorable Speaker, you remember when we were approaching, we were just hit with very big taxation claims, things we did not owe. The danger of clause 36,
yes,
Honorable Speaker.
Order, Peter. Rahim, what is out of order? Give the mic.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I think Honorable Kaluma is misleading this House, he has not read the report. The committee has already proposed clause 36 to be deleted, what Treasury had proposed. So it has already been deleted. He should read the report. Thank you.
Honorable Kaluma.
I've read the report and they propose deletion. Until it is deleted and the House resolves so, it is part of the bill. And I want to encourage the committee that if indeed there is a proposal to delete it, let it not suffer the fate of other proposals by committees which were dropped at the floor. Because the consequences otherwise, Honorable Speaker, would be grave. And I'm telling Honorable Dawood, a person will hit you with a taxation claim of over 2 billion or 20 billion approaching elections. And you know you will not get that tax clearance certificate if you have to deposit 20 or 200 million to then proceed to exercise your rights thereunder. So it will deny access to justice, which is a fundamental right. I would request that the committee, if indeed you have recommended, proceed and deal with it. Honorable Speaker, I have a concern with what is at clause 24.
And clause 24 is talking about the increment in terms of income tax up to 35% for category of people. Honorable Speaker, I want the committee to consider those people in fixed term contracts, like state officers within this parliament. And I know you know who state officers within the institution of parliament are. Previously, Honorable Speaker, salary increment was a right to state officers within parliament, like all other employees under the Employment Act. But Honorable Speaker, when the terms were gazetted for some officers, particularly the members here, the annual salary increment was taken away. The consequence is that so many people under that arrangement went into their single-term contract without increment. And you know the fact of the matter is that we may be talking, but so many of us do not take any salary home. You've taken mortgages. When you are increasing to 35%, you had entered into arrangements you cannot renege on. Where are you going to get this money? And you know what a mortgage is. Where are you going to get the additional 5% to pay? When I know, just like me, I don't know the others, Honorable Speaker, but me, the newspapers have carried reports confirming I earn zero pay because of mortgage. And it is a contract you cannot rewrite after you go into it. Are we going to think of situations of those fixed term contracts without annual increment, or what measures are we talking about? Honorable Speaker, the issue of VAT on fuel has been spoken to. But the fact of the matter is that this will affect everybody. And Honorable Speaker, across the world, finance bills are negotiated. Honorable Speaker, in the last parliament, I remember the regime then, the Jubilee regime, wanted to move VAT to 16. And out of negotiations weighing the situation of the economy, we settled out of negotiations at 8%. I would request that, because this is going to affect so many other, the economic issues down there, we at the very worst leave it where it is. Honorable Speaker, on the housing levy, Honorable Tiende brought the element of it being a county function. And I think we consider that seriously. But I wanted also to say something, Honorable Speaker. Honorable Speaker, in addition to the fact that this is a county thing, it is not defined clearly how you will benefit out of your contributions into this levy. And I think in as much as some people may want to push it, let us define. If it were not a tax, Honorable Speaker, it would define how you benefit. We are levied for NHIF, NSSF, and others, but you can benefit. How are you benefiting directly on this? If you are not, Honorable Speaker, I fear we may be going into violation of Article 40 on people's property rights. Honorable Speaker, there is an issue in clause 51. And I'm saying this, Honorable Speaker, because the chair is listening to me and the committee is there. The area of tax and amnesty, Honorable Speaker, is something we should delete from our laws completely. Honorable Speaker, there is a time I visited a commissioner in charge of taxation. And just on his desk there, a person who was to pay the country over 10 billion, the minister just wrote, pay 200 million or 2 million. And we lose all that money. We need to stop amnesty. And you should question, as members of this committee presenting this thing, why are we allowing amnesty up to 31st December 2022? Who are these we want to give amnesty to before we can enforce the law rightly? And it has been happening. Thank you, Honorable Speaker.
Finish your point.
Yes, Honorable Speaker, I would request that you look at that. If we are not having some fat cows to be, and I believe on taxation, nobody should be saved. Remove the idea of amnesty, let us go for people. And then lastly, Honorable Speaker, each year we lose over 700 billion to corruption in this country. Look at the budget for EACC and the agencies fighting corruption, which we passed yesterday. We cannot be debating in retrospect, but I'm thinking if we were able to save that money we are losing to corruption, your budget would be, in terms of what we need, some 2.1 trillion, and we would be having a lot of money to deal with. Honorable Speaker, the problem is that we have encouraged corruption.
And then people we should be taking money from are being given amnesty. I request, Honorable Speaker, that we look at all those issues among the other issues raised by the members. And so long as those issues have not been looked into, Honorable Speaker, I stand to oppose.
Wakili Mureu.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, sir, for this opportunity to contribute to the finance bill. And Mr. Speaker, sir, first and foremost, I'd like to support this bill for the following reasons. Mr. Speaker, sir, this is an economic growth resuscitation bill. And why is it that? Because the interventions proposed by this bill, Mr. Speaker, is addressing the core of our economy. Mr. Speaker, sir, the finance bill is addressing on the debt level and how we can get out of that debt level. Currently, our debt level is at close to about 10 trillion. We spend over 60% of our collections to pay those debts. The second issue this bill is trying to address is unemployment. We have 6 million members of our youth who are qualified to be in employment, but sadly, they are there getting wasted. The other issue this bill is addressing is the cost of living. Mr. Speaker, sir, as you are aware, the cost of unga is high, the cost of sugar is high, the cost of education is high, and yet, Mr. Speaker, sir, our people, even in all those circumstances, they want good roads, they want water, they want bursary for their children, they want to chase away darkness by having electricity. How else, Mr. Speaker, sir, are we supposed to address all those challenges by avoiding to pay taxes? Mr. Speaker, sir, my position is very simple. If you look at the provision on manufacturing, the finance bill has addressed clearly on the issue about our industries. And it's a sad story, Mr. Speaker, sir, because currently our manufacturing is only contributing 7.2% of our GDP. It is coming down from 9.2 a few years back. I know the manufacturers have an ambitious plan to raise that to about 30% by 2030, but that cannot be achieved if we do not protect our local manufacturers. And the way to support our local manufacturers is, number one, zero rate on the excise duty, especially on goods produced locally, but also put in a tax on the goods which are imported but which can be manufactured locally. For example, things like furniture, which come in from China and other countries, put excise duty on them. Goods like sugar, goods like iron and steel, which can be able to be manufactured locally. Because again, that's the only way we can be able to resuscitate our manufacturing. Number two, Mr. Speaker, sir, manufacturing support 40% of our employment. Today, as I said earlier, the biggest challenge is that we have highly educated young people, but they do not have employment. And the only way we can be able to address that is to ensure that we address the element of manufacturing, because that's the only way we can be able to place them in employment. Secondly, Mr. Speaker, sir, is about the issue of a digital economy. As you are aware, Kenya is one of the leading countries in terms of innovation economy. And being that the countries all around this, Kenya, they look up to Kenya to just to copy what you are doing. Look at the way we have embraced the telephonic technology, the payment system, the lending system. The countries around in Africa, they are looking to Kenya as a shining star. But the question is, have Kenyans benefited from that bubbling economy? And that's why the proposal to put in a tax is for purposes of that industry to contribute to the nation, to contribute to the economy of this country, as we also along the way create employment. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for that opportunity. And I support this bill.
Fatuma Jeho.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for giving me this opportunity. I rise to oppose this bill, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, there is no doubt that we are on an economic downturn. Our economic is collapsing. Mr. Speaker, today, if we were given this bill and none of us were a member of this honorable House, I can assure you none of us could have passed this bill. I say that, Mr. Speaker, because of few reasons. I'll start with the housing levy, Mr. Speaker. I've just looked at the report, and they are telling us they have proposed 1.5, Mr. Speaker. And looking at the report, they are telling us they are going to build 50,000 affordable housing. I would like to ask these honorable members and the chair of this committee, have you given us the timeline of this proposed affordable housing? What is the budget, Mr. Speaker? How many Kenyans are they going to be occupied in these 50,000 houses? Out of the 50 million Kenyans we have, I would like to take an example of a pay slip of a teacher or a police officer, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I wish I came with a pay slip of a teacher. These people are serving so many loans, Mr. Speaker. We are adding for them a housing levy of 1.5. How are they going to pay, Mr. Speaker? Our police officers are dying out of depression because of the loans they are paying. We cannot add for them, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, Mr. Speaker, I would like to say collecting and taxing the citizens is not a bad thing. But it's not the right time for the people to be taxed. It has come the wrong time, Mr. Speaker. It's about our people, the people we represent, Mr. Speaker. Today, I would like to take this opportunity to talk to His Excellency the President. The people who are seated on the other side, Mr. President, are not passing this bill because they want it. They are doing this for you, Mr. President. Mr. Speaker, I want you to protect me, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, history will judge us for passing this bill, Mr. Speaker. Let me go to manufacture. There is no point of order here, Mr. Speaker.
Point of order, Honorable Speaker. Honorable Speaker, we are debating the report on the Finance Committee.
No, we are
bill.
debating the finance bill. Give him the mic.
Honorable Speaker, it is not in order for the Honorable Fatma to impute improper motives on her colleagues as far as this House is concerned in terms of the debate. He's saying we want to please the President. Honorable Speaker, this bill is not owned by the President. It is owned by this House, Honorable Speaker. And she has an opportunity to support or oppose. And the majority will have their say. Minority will have their way. Minority will have their say. So it is wrong for her to impute improper motives on our colleagues and say we want to please the President. I mean, really, it's wrong. It's an insult to the colleagues. It's an insult. And she doesn't even come to the House.
Order. Fatuma, each member is here in their own right. So restrict yourself to the bill.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Speaker. I will continue by what I was saying, Mr. Speaker. I am here as the county MP for Wajir. I'll speak out my mind and I'll say what I think is right, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I'm here courtesy of the people of Wajir and I represent Kenyans equally, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I would like to touch on the manufacturing. There is no doubt that the manufacturers are leaving Kenya, Mr. Speaker. Today's paper, we have seen the billionaires are leaving Kenyans. It has come to our attention. Most of us, we need to do something, Mr. Speaker. If you look at M-Pesa, right now the government is spying on our M-Pesa transaction, Mr. Speaker. We cannot even deposit 100,000 on our M-Pesa account because it's taxed, Mr. Speaker. Honorable members, we just need to put our foot down and just think, for heaven's sake, Mr. Speaker. It's not about which party you belong to.
What's your point of order? Give the mic to Honorable Kagombe. Yes, there you are.
Mr. Speaker, again, I rise on standing order number 91.1. And when you say, that is a very grievous accusation of the government, that the government is spying on Kenyans on M-Pesa. That is something that needs to be substantiated because this House has a responsibility to debate such a breach of privacy of Kenyans, and therefore the honorable member cannot just stand here and talk about it and move on. So we need to substantiate what you're saying. Number two, we are discussing the finance bill, Mr. Speaker. And this finance bill, Mr. Speaker, has got nothing to do with the issues that she's raising. That is an issue that she can come and she knows the way to raise such and address and such an issue to this House. A proper way of raising it through a motion or through a bill, Mr. Speaker. Thank you.
Fatuma, wind up. Your time is up.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. When I talk on M-Pesa, I'm talking on technology, Mr. Speaker. I'll leave it at that, Mr. Speaker. I'll go to food security, Mr. Speaker. We are doing VAT fuel on 16%. Mr. Speaker, I just want someone to explain to Kenyans, when you impose 16% on fuel, how do you expect to secure food on this country? Everything depends on food, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, as I sit down, Mr. Speaker, sorry, I've been interrupted and I've forgotten a few things. Mr. Speaker, we need to earn the trust of Kenyans, Mr. Speaker. We remember what happened, the Gulwana Kulalu project, the millions and the trillions shillings that were spent on that. Mr. Speaker, as I said, we need to trust, we need to get the confidence of the Kenyans.
Honorable Makilap.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I want to state from the onset that I shall support this finance bill as a member of the Finance Committee and as a member of Parliament for Baringo North. Mr. Speaker, there are puzzling events that has happened. Number one, yesterday we went close by close approving expenditure for the budget, knowing very well that this budget shall be financed through ordinary revenues and revenues that will be collected through this finance bill. Mr. Speaker, it is therefore very illogical to again, attack the same finance bill that tries to raise revenue to completely be able to finance the budget for this country. Mr. Speaker, we are all Kenyans. All of us here, regardless of which political divide you come from, in this particular budget that we passed close by close yesterday, has programs that are cuts across the Republic of Kenya. How then do we finance these programs if we don't finance using our own resources? Mr. Speaker, I am a believer of Kenya. I believe that this country shall be able to move to become one of the economies of Africa, strong economies of Africa. How did these countries that have succeeded be able to finance their programs? Mr. Speaker, we can never be able to develop this country using borrowed resources. Time has come that we must finance this country using our own resources by at least a little bit sacrificing for the nation. Mr. Speaker, we met some, in this finance committee, there were about 1,500 petitions. For the first time, Mr. Speaker, I sat for more than 20 days trying to listen to professionals of high caliber who argue from left, center, right on the issues that are raised in this finance bill, Mr. Speaker. And we as a committee, Mr. Speaker, had made some proposals Mr. Speaker, and I wonder even my good friend Wandai did not read that we made a proposal that the issue of wigs, eyelashes, and everything were deleted. We made a proposal that this must be deleted to protect the hustlers of this country, because that clause, many Kenyans who came before us felt that this is a very bad clause. Mr. Speaker, we also on rental income, Mr. Speaker, being able to make a proposal to reduce from 10 to 7.5%, so that the investors across the political divide who want to do projects on housing, Mr. Speaker, will be able to get value for their money. How else do we protect the people of Kenya, Mr. Speaker, when we reduced the housing levy from 3 to 1.5%, Mr. Speaker? We sat as a committee and be able to address the issues that were raised by Kenyans, Mr. Speaker, even including bringing in coffee. We made a proposal to zero-rate export of coffee levy, Mr. Speaker. Coffee was not there. We brought in, there was only tea, zero rating on tea. But we brought in coffee because the Wanchikus of this country, Mr. Speaker, would want to benefit by actually getting maximum returns for coffee, tea, among other products that are actually grown in Kenya. Mr. Speaker, this is our country. This finance bill attempts to raise 289 to around 300 billion. Mr. Speaker, how then do we raise these programs, Mr. Speaker, and all the people of Kenya, regardless of where they live, whether they live in Azimio zones, they require roads, they require medicine, they require fertilizer, they require programs to lift their lives. How else do we finance and grow the economy of this country? The people of Kenya must be able to sacrifice a little bit so that we can finance our programs, finance our budgets, using our own resources, not the resources borrowed from the white people, Mr. Speaker. Enough is enough. We must grow our economy using our own resources and using ourselves, Mr. Speaker. We must be able to contribute. Azimio people do not live outside Kenya. They live in Kenya together with all of us. And we must know that this is our country, and we must work together, pool up resources, provide solutions rather than attacking everything in this finance, Mr. Speaker. Let us provide solutions for the welfare of the people of Kenya, because this is our country and we can.
Adan Kainan.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I've had the opportunity to work with President Moi, President Kibaki, President Uhuru Kenyatta, and right now President William Ruto, Mr. Speaker. And we must all accept that we have a beautiful country called Kenya, Mr. Speaker, which all of us as individuals, as groups, must accept and believe in. Mr. Speaker, the issue of budget making, I know, is emotive, it is difficult, it's painful. And I must say from the onset that as a member of the Finance Committee, we have had the honest task, Mr. Speaker, of going through the different presentations by different groups from different sectors of our economy, Mr. Speaker, in pursuit of both their collective or individual rights, Mr. Speaker, because Kenya is a democracy. Every individual has the right to a divergent view, Mr. Speaker, and that is why, in the minds of the framers of the current Constitution, Mr. Speaker, the right to public participation is enshrined in the Constitution. But, Mr. Speaker, having said this, I want each one of us as the leadership, and being the leadership and being in this August House, Mr. Speaker, is a privilege. Because out of the 50 million Kenyans, Mr. Speaker, Kenyans in their own wisdom have decided to have a few of us here as their representative, Mr. Speaker. And we want to reflect. And I want to ask each one of you a question without venturing into your political persuasion. Where were we in 1963? Where did our forefathers expect us to be? And where are we today? And what is expected each one of us to do so that Kenya joins the League of Developed Nations, Mr. Speaker? Mr. Speaker, this country has recently been voted as one of the best in human resource capital, meaning therefore outside there, in the eyes of the international community, there are many Kenyans who have gone to school. Our task as elected representatives is to give them opportunities to get jobs, is to give them opportunities to remove them from that ladder of being underemployed and unemployed, Mr. Speaker. How is this achievable? This is achievable only through taxation, Mr. Speaker. And Mr. Speaker, I want to say this. Today we expected, and I know we have my friends here, in our democracy we have two sides. Today we expected, what I expected, and this will have guided me, is to get an alternative tax proposals from those who are opposed to what the government is doing. It is not there. We expected to see an alternative budget proposal. We are not seeing it, Mr. Speaker. What is there, Mr. Speaker, is a government elected by the people of Kenya implementing their manifesto, Mr. Speaker, and therefore denying them the right to pursue their manifesto, Mr. Speaker, is an infringement on both their rights as individuals, as government, Mr. Speaker, and even to the people of Kenya, Mr. Speaker. And I want to say this as a member of the Finance Committee, having gone through this, and having said taxation is a painful thing, Mr. Speaker, I stand to support the finance bill as it is, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, you have been around as a person of immense institutional memory, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, look at the missed opportunities. This country, because of the fear of the unknown, we have stagnated. We have lost our stature as an economic hub. It's simply because we sit somewhere there. Look at what is happening to the GDP of Ethiopia. Look at what is happening to the GDP of Tanzania. Look at what is happening to the GDP of Uganda. Where do you want to place Kenya, Mr. Speaker? It's because we have persuaded ourselves that it's not us to do the right thing. Somebody else must come. It's our time to say this country requires development, Mr. Speaker. It's our time to say, as members of the 13th Parliament, what the government is proposing, bring the alternative. And let me tell you this for free. What you are being asked to do is to deny the government taxes, misinform the Kenyan public so that your regime becomes unpopular and collapses. Don't accept that truth. This government must function. This government has been elected democratically by the people of Kenya. And therefore, 1 month ago, Mr. Speaker, the salary is delayed. You saw the kind of picketing that was going on. I'm sure in your office, you have had Molongos, ya watu kuuliza mishahara. Isn't it? Where will the government generate the money from? The government must generate the money from taxations, through this bill. And therefore, Mr. Speaker, what I want to say is this. We have a country. This country must move on. This is the final takeoff for the Republic of Kenya. And please,
Lotte. Okay, give him a minute.
Is not cowardice. It's part of our democracy. Let's debate. This is a debating chamber. Let's not shout at each other. And I always say this as a practitioner. Let's debate. The majority will have their way, while the minority will have had their say. And that is the essence of democracy. Pass this bill as recommended by the finance bill. I support.
Titus Lotte from Kacheliba.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for allowing me to contribute to the finance bill. Mr. Speaker, as a member of this respected house, and also a member of the society that has a mental capacity to think, I want to contribute as follows to this bill, Mr. Speaker. Far from it, Mr. Speaker, there is a lot of information that has gone to the public that this bill is supposed to be punitive to Kenyans. But having looked through it, Mr. Speaker, I realized that this bill is trying to address the inefficiency that has been there in our tax regime, Mr. Speaker. We've actually been collecting very little amount of revenue vis-a-vis the capacity that we have. And this bill is not as punitive as we are told. I've looked through this bill, Mr. Speaker, and I've realized that only 3 main taxes have been introduced, and the rest have actually been made efficient. The first one, Mr. Speaker, is the digital monetization of the digital content. And this is in regards to the principle of taxation, Mr. Speaker, where taxation is supposed to be as evolving as possible in regards to respond to the evolving nature of our society. when our tax regime was done, Mr. Speaker, there was very little in terms of digital content. And because Kenyans are embracing the digital content very quickly, our tax regime is also supposed to embrace. And so, introducing the 15% on the digital content, Mr. Speaker, is in regards to the involvement of this. This is very nice, Mr. Speaker, because we've actually seen our revenue falling because a lot of advertisements, a lot of our contents are actually becoming digital. And so the mother of our taxation is also reducing because we cannot now net in the traditional taxes. So, Mr. Speaker, I think it is important that we actually also go along with the digital migration. The other tax that I've seen as new is the club entrance fee, Mr. Speaker. Initially, this club entrance fee was free, and it's only for the privileged, Mr. Speaker. The club members that are sitting here are paying hundreds of thousands to millions to clubs, and yet they're supposed to be exempted. There is no common man, there is no common person that actually benefits from this. I actually love the fact that we need supposed to introduce a tax to this club so that we net in these people that are actually in clubs, clubbing and using a lot of money and want to be exempted. The other one, Mr. Speaker, is the introduction of the 5% withholding tax on advertisement. Mr. Speaker, there are a lot of diseases that are coming to this country because advertising has become so cheap that people are misleading Kenyans. We've actually seen people being conned. We've seen people buying products that are not necessary because there is no tax on advertising. Mr. Speaker, introducing a 5% withholding tax on this will actually safeguard Kenyans from the conmen that are actually advertising if they are allowed to advertise for free. Finally, if I go to the housing, Mr. Speaker, I want to say that this country, we host the 3 main out of 10 slums in Africa. And until we actually agree to say we want to move out of the slums, we will continue premising and saying that we are not ready. We should be ready as now, Mr. Speaker. We want to move from being a country that is living in slums to a country that is supposed now to be a developed country. Mr. Speaker, if I look at the superhighway, the Thika superhighway, if I look at the SGR, I look at the Nairobi Expressway, everybody in this country, the people of Kachaliba contributed to it, Mr. Speaker, and yet they don't use it on everyday basis. So even this housing, we are all supposed to contribute to it because at the end of it all, when Kenyans get houses, whether you get it or not, it is for the common good of this country. So, Mr. Speaker, I stand to support. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, sir, for giving me a chance to speak to this bill. And I first of all start by congratulating the Committee on Finance for the tedious and good work that they did, and even all the way to calling out the public participation. Mr. Speaker, sir, yesterday we concluded on the Committee on Supply on the budget. And we were able to adopt and to pass this, Mr. Speaker. And therefore today, we are discussing the finance bill, which is supposed to look for money to finance to run this budget, Mr. Speaker. And therefore, I failed to understand how yesterday we can be able to pass the bill on the Committee of Supply, and today we start going against on how to finance it. Mr. Speaker, sir, our budget of 3.67 trillion must be financed by the people of this Republic of Kenya. Mr. Speaker, sir, let us not go out and not be realistic and even play politics, populist politics, to tell our people that we are against the finance bill just because there is the taxation. Mr. Speaker, sir, there is no other way that we can be able to finance our budget other than through the taxation. Mr. Speaker, all of us, we understand that the cost of living is not good to all of us. We also understand that there is the debt that was left by the last regime, Mr. Speaker. We also understand there is unemployment and so many other. And therefore, as a government, we must look into how we are going to focus on areas to stimulate the economic growth and reduce the cost of living, among other development measures that are awaited by our people. Mr. Speaker, sir, I'm surprised to see the Azimio coalition standing up and going against this finance bill. Yet all the time we see the government officers visiting their areas. Every stand up with a mic to request for a load. Another one requesting for the installation of electricity in their rural areas, the constituencies. They also speak a lot about the health. They speak a lot and to so many other areas. My question today, how do we finance for all the requests that you put? And that time you are taking the mic to ask that. It is so that your people can hear that you are really asking from the government so that they may get the development. That time you are happy when you hear the crabs that you have made your day. You have made your political marriage. But when we come here to look for money to finance this development, you are here standing up and talking 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. My dear, let us be optimistic that for this government to deliver, we must go for the taxation. We are against for more loans because, Mr. Speaker, sir, for whatever we have not been able to pay. You have heard from the budget committee, they are saying 60% of our finances that we have is going to finance the loans. Mr. Speaker, sir, it is only 40% that is being left for the development and also for the recurrence. So, Mr. Speaker, we must struggle to make sure whatever our people are waiting for, we look for it, and it can only come from the taxation. And we are taxing those who are employed. We are taxing those who are in business. We are taxing those who have. Let us not incite our people who do not have when we are trying to create some employment and some areas that they can be able to employ themselves so that they can also be able to put food on their table. Mr. Speaker, sir, there is no one here who came to this plenary without taking breakfast. Mr. Speaker, sir, we are also going to take lunch. Mr. Speaker, sir, we are also going to enjoy good supper or dinners. Mr. Speaker, sir, the people that we are looking for do not have anything to put on their table. They are not even able to give clothing and other needed measures that are required to their children. So, Mr. Speaker, sir, we must realize this. Mr. Speaker, sir, I want to speak a little onto the housing fund. We have really put a lot of politics when it...
Time is up. Memusi Kanjori.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for giving me this opportunity to also contribute to this finance bill. And Mr. Speaker, let me start by saying I oppose the finance bill, and I really pity with my colleagues from Kenya Kwanza because they're really trying to justify something that they also know will not fly in their villages. Mr. Speaker, this is a draconian and backward way of collecting revenue from our people. Honorable Speaker, as representatives of the people, I want to hear one member of parliament whose people come to him to ask for a house. I don't know, Mr. Speaker, where the executive has been informed that the priority of Kenyans is houses, Mr. Speaker.
Order.
Mr. Speaker, please protect me. Mr. Speaker,
Order, honorable members. I'll protect you, also avoid unhelpful provocations.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The proposal, Mr. Speaker, to collect 2,500 shillings and targeting 3 million Kenyans Mr. Speaker, that is collecting 7.5 billion shillings a month. Honorable Speaker, 7.5 billion shillings a month. If this money was proposed to be put in education, which is an area that most of our people are in need of, if this 7.5 billion shillings was put in education, I would gladly contribute 2,500 shillings. And Mr. Speaker, the impact that that money would have, 7.5 billion, if that money was given to 290 constituencies, which these members of parliament represent, each constituency will get over 25 million shillings a month. That is something that if was proposed, we would gladly support. Because, Mr. Speaker, our people need certain basic things, food being one of them. Honorable Speaker, the money that Kenyans contribute to NHIF, for example, the money that Kenyans contribute to NSSF, NHIF right now is broke. It cannot pay its expenses. NSSF, people are retiring and cannot be given their pension. You want to come and tell people who are already seeing misappropriation of money to continue contributing. Mr. Speaker, this is wrong. I see a lot of insensitivity in this government. I see a lot of cluelessness. And Mr. Speaker, let me say this. The unfortunate thing, when the UDA administration was campaigning, they appealed to the people who are desperate in this country. They appealed to the so-called hustlers. But, Mr. Speaker, the first opportunity that this government had to show that they really meant what they said, this is the first budget that they are bringing. This first opportunity that they have, they've squandered it. They've squandered it, Mr. Speaker, because the first thing that I would have wanted to see is how the loopholes of corruption will be sealed, how wastage will be sealed by this government. Mr. Speaker, if we cannot continue affording a budget of over 3 trillion shillings, what is wrong with us saying that this country can only finance 2.1 trillion shillings and not tax Kenyans to death? Mr. Speaker, I oppose. Thank you.
Mishimbogo.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. Honorable Speaker, from the onset, I want to strongly oppose this finance bill. Honorable Speaker, a formula of taxation which is going to burden the Kenyans and increase the cost of living, Honorable Speaker. Honorable Speaker, increasing the fuel levy to 16%, it means the cost of production is going to be high, the cost of transportation is going to be high. It will also affect agriculture because agriculture depends on machinery and the machinery also depends on diesel and petrol power.
Order,
Honorable Speaker.
Order, Mishimbogo, you will have 4.5 minutes. You will be the first in the afternoon. Members, you may rise. It's now 1 o'clock. We'll take a lunch break and resume at 2:30.